Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nightmare Narratives. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Vincent Crowthorne, and I've been a park ranger for 12 years. People think that means I know everything about the woods, about what's natural and what isn't. They're wrong. Dead wrong. November 1977. The anniversary was coming up. 1 year since the Silver Bridge in Point Pleasant collapsed and killed 46 people. I tried not to think about it, but the newspapers wouldn't let anyone forget. Every day brought new stories about the strange red-eyed creature people claimed to see before the disaster. They called it the Mothman. I called it nonsense. Flying humanoids were just birds, misidentified in poor light by scared people. I should know. I spent 6 years as an Air Force pilot before a crash grounded me permanently. My hands still shake when I think about spinning toward the earth, watching the ground rush up to meet me. But I survived. My wife, Sarah, didn't survive her accident 2 years later. Car versus semi-truck on a rainy night. The truck driver walked away without a scratch. That's when the insomnia started. That's when I began seeing her in my dreams, asking why I got to live when she had to die. My station sits near Seneca Rocks in the Monongahela National Forest. 900 feet of sandstone rising straight up from the valley like God's own tombstone. Beautiful during the day. At night, those rock faces look like they're watching you. The old Cherokee used to come here for vision quests. Sometimes I wonder what they saw up there in the darkness. I was sitting at my desk that Tuesday morning, sorting through the usual pile of reports. Hikers with twisted ankles, campers who forgot to put out their fires, rock climbers who bit off more than they could chew. The radio crackled with routine chatter from other stations. Normal stuff, boring stuff. Then the call came in. Ranger Station 7, this is Aviation Control. We've got a militaire. I transport down in your sector. Emergency crews are en route. I grabbed my gear and headed for the crash site. Military planes don't just fall out of the sky for no reason. As I drove the winding forest road, I noticed something strange. No birds. Usually the woods are full of them. Crows, hawks, sparrows. That morning, nothing. Even the squirrels seemed to have vanished. The fog rolled in thick as I got closer to Seneca Rocks. My compass needle spun like a broken toy. The radio filled with static. I'd seen electromagnetic storms before, but this felt different. Wrong. I found the crash site at the base of the rocks. What I saw there still gives me nightmares. The plane had hit vertically, straight down like it had been dropped from heaven. No forward momentum, no skid marks, no scattered debris field like you'd expect from a normal crash. Just a perfect crater with the transport buried nose first in the earth. The federal investigators were already there, along with some military people in dark suits. Their equipment kept malfunctioning. Cameras wouldn't work. Radios squealed with feedback. Metal detectors went crazy. One of the investigators, a thin man with nervous eyes, told me they'd never seen anything like it. It's like the plane just stopped flying, he said. Dropped like a stone. The black box recording. He shook his head. Nothing but screaming and this sound, like giant wings flapping. I helped them secure the area, setting up barriers and directing the recovery teams. Professional stuff. Routine. But as evening came on and the fog got thicker, I started hearing things. Whispers in languages I didn't recognize. Footsteps that didn't match any human stride. That's when one of the climbers came down from the rocks. Tommy Morrison, a local guy who'd been scaling these walls since he was a kid. His face was white as paper. "Ranger Crowthorne," he said, his voice shaking. "You need to see this." He led me to his climbing gear, pulled out a camera with a telephoto lens. I was taking pictures of the crash from up on the rocks. "Look at this." The photograph showed the crash site from above. Rescue workers moving around like ants. But there, circling high overhead, was a shape that made my blood freeze. Massive wings spread wide, easily 15 feet across, and 2 red dots where the eyes should be, glowing like cigarette tips in the darkness. "That thing was watching the whole time," Tommy whispered. "Just flying in circles, watching, like it was waiting for something." I stared at the picture until my eyes burned. It had to be a trick of the light, a double exposure, something. But deep down, in the place where nightmares live, I knew better. That night, alone in my station, I pulled out my collection of newspaper clippings. I'd been gathering them for months. Reports of unexplained aircraft sightings, strange flying creatures, electromagnetic anomalies. I told myself I was looking for rational explanations, scientific answers. But as I spread them across my desk, a pattern emerged. Every sighting, every report came from locations where disasters had struck within weeks. Mine collapses, bridge collapses, building fires. And always, someone reported seeing red eyes in the sky beforehand. The radio crackled to life, making me jump. "Vincent!" The voice was soft, familiar, impossible. "Vincent, can you hear me?" It was Sarah's voice, my dead wife, speaking to me through the static. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely key the microphone. "Sarah? Sarah, is that you? You need to listen, Vincent. It's coming back. The gray angel is coming back." The transmission dissolved into static, then silence. I sat there for hours, calling her name into the darkness, but she was gone. Outside my window, something moved in the shadows between the trees, something large, with wings. The next morning brought more strangeness. I drove out to check on a group of hunters who'd been camping near the old civil war signal station ruins, found their campsite abandoned, gear scattered like they'd run off in a hurry. But that wasn't the weird part. The weird part was how their equipment was arranged. Sleeping bags laid out in a perfect circle, camp chairs positioned to face outward, like they were watching for something. And in the center of it all, their rifles. Not dropped or thrown down, but carefully placed in a star pattern, barrels pointing in 6 different directions. No hunter I knew would leave expensive gear behind, especially not arranged like some kind of ritual. I radioed for a search team, spent the day looking for the missing men. We found them that evening, walking along the main road 20 miles south. They had no memory of leaving their campsite. No memory of the past 3 days at all. Just woke up walking down the highway with no idea how they got there. "Last thing I remember," said their leader, a grizzled old-timer named Pete Kowalski, "was hearing this sound. Like helicopter blades, but wrong somehow. Slower, heavier." He rubbed his temples like his head hurt. Then nothing until we were walking on the road. I drove them back to get their gear. The campsite looked normal now. Just abandoned equipment scattered around like you'd expect. But I knew what I'd seen earlier. Someone or something had arranged those items with purpose. That night, the radio came alive again. "Vincent," Sarah's voice, clearer this time. "Grid reference 38.8347, 79.3711. 2 days." I grabbed my maps, plotted the coordinates. A section of forest about 10 miles north, near the Summersville Dam. Nothing special about it, just trees and hiking trails. "Sarah, what's at those coordinates? What happens in 2 days?" "You have to warn them, Vincent. Like I tried to warn them. Like I tried to warn you." The static swallowed her words, but I heard enough. "Warn who?" "Warn them about we, hat." I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photograph Tommy had taken. Those red eyes, watching, waiting. Around 3 a.m, I gave up and drove out. To the coordinates Sarah had given me. The fog was thick again, my headlights barely cutting through it. The radio played nothing but white noise. I parked at the trailhead and hiked into the woods with my flashlight. The beam seemed weak, swallowed up by the darkness. No sounds except my footsteps on the dead leaves. No insects, no night birds. Even the wind had stopped. Then I found it. A perfect circle of dead trees, maybe 50 feet across. Not burned, not cut down, just dead. Their bark was gray and cracked, branches brittle as old bones. And in the center of the circle, The grass had been scorched in a pattern I recognized from my Air Force days. Landing marks. But no aircraft I knew could land in a space that small. My Geiger counter started clicking. I'd brought it as a joke, figuring maybe the military transport had been carrying something radioactive. But as I approached the dead circle, the clicks got faster. At the edge of the pattern, the needle pegged out completely. Something had landed here recently. Something that left radiation behind. I was backing away from the circle when I heard it. The sound Pete Kowalski had described. Like helicopter blades, but wrong. Slow and heavy, with a wet quality that made my skin crawl. The sound was coming from above. I looked up, and there it was. 15 feet of wingspan, easy. Gray-black fur covering a body too large for any bird that ever lived. Long, powerful arms ending in claws that could rip a man in half. And the eyes. Red as brake lights, intelligent as a human's, staring down at me with something that might have been curiosity. Or hunger. The creature, I couldn't think of it as anything else, hovered maybe 30 feet up, wings beating with that awful wet sound. It tilted its head like it was studying me, and I felt something touch my mind. Not thoughts exactly, but images. Flashes of disaster, the Silam. Ver Bridge twisting and falling, cars tumbling into the dark water, screaming people trapped in metal coffins. And then new images. A dam wall cracking, water roaring through the break, a wall of destruction racing down the valley, sweeping away everything in its path. The Summersville Dam, the coordinates Sarah had given me. The creature's eyes flared brighter, and I knew it was trying to tell me something, warning me, just like it had tried to warn people about the bridge. But before I could process what I was seeing, the sound of approaching vehicles cut through the night. Headlights swept through the trees, moving fast. The creature looked toward the lights, then back at me. For just a moment, I could have sworn I saw something like sadness in those red eyes. Then it was gone. Vanishing into the fog so quickly, I wondered if I'd imagined the whole thing. The vehicles belonged to the same military people from the crash site. The thin investigator and 3 men in dark suits, all carrying equipment I didn't recognize. "Ranger Crowthorne," the investigator said, not sounding surprised to find me there. "You need to come with us." "What's going on?" "That's classified, but I can tell you this much. You're not the first person to report unusual activity in this area. We've been tracking electromagnetic anomalies for months. Something's disturbing the natural order around here." He gestured to the dead circle. "And we think you've been in contact with it." They knew about the radio transmissions. Somehow, they'd been monitoring my communications with Sarah. The thought made me sick and angry at the same time. "My wife is dead," I said. "She died 2 years ago." "We know. Car accident on Route 9, November 15th, 1975, but that's not who's been talking to you, Mr. Crowthorne. We believe someone, or something, is using your grief to manipulate you." "For what purpose?" The investigator's face was grim. "That's what we intend to find out." They escorted me back to their temporary command post, a cluster of trailers and radio antennas set up near the crash site. Inside, banks of monitoring equipment tracked everything from seismic activity to electromagnetic pulses. The walls were covered with photographs and maps, all marking locations where strange sightings had been reported. Point Pleasant was marked with a red X. "The entity appears every 12 to 18 months, the investigator explained. "Always in areas where geological stress is building toward a catastrophic failure. It seems drawn to impending disasters." "Maybe it's trying to warn people," I suggested. "Or maybe it's causing them." He pulled out a thick file folder. "We have records going back 200 years. Every appearance is followed by tragedy within 72 hours. Every single time." He showed me historical accounts, newspaper clippings, government reports. The Cherokee called it the Gray Angel of Death. Civil War soldiers reported seeing it before major battles. During World War II, bomber crews claimed it followed them over Germany, and those missions never returned. "The question is," he continued, "why has it focused on you? What makes Vincent Crowthorne special?" I didn't have an answer. But deep down, I was beginning to understand. The creature wasn't just predicting disasters. It was trying to prevent them. And for some reason, it had chosen me to help. The radio in the trailer crackled to life. "Vincent," Sarah's voice, but distorted now, layered with harmonics that hurt to hear. 36 hours. The water is coming. You have to make them listen." The investigators scrambled to trace the signal, but I already knew they wouldn't find its source. Sarah wasn't broadcasting from anywhere in this world. "What water?" I asked the radio. "Sarah, what water?" "The dam, Vincent. It's going to break. 8,000 people in the valley below. You have to warn them." The lead investigator grabbed my arm. "Don't answer it. That thing is feeding off your emotional connection to your wife's memory." But I pulled away from him, keyed the microphone. "How do I warn them? Nobody will believe me." "The same way I tried to warn them about my accident. The same way I tried to warn you. But you have to choose, Vincent. You have to choose to believe." The transmission ended in a burst of static. On the monitoring equipment, every needle swung to maximum and stayed there. Outside, something roared. Not the sound of wings this time, but raw animal fury. The creature had found us. The roar shattered every piece of electronic equipment in the trailer. Monitors exploded in showers of sparks, radio sets filled with smoke. The investigators dove for cover as the lights went out, plunging us into darkness. Through the trailer's small window, I saw it clearly for the first time. The creature perched on top of a communications tower, wings spread wide against the storm clouds. It was even larger than I'd thought, easily 8 feet tall with muscles that rippled under gray fur. Its head moved with predatory grace, scanning the compound below with those burning red eyes. When it looked at me through the window, I felt that mental touch again. Stronger this time, more insistent. Images flooded my mind. The Summersville Dam, massive concrete walls holding back millions of gallons of water, stress fractures spreading like spider webs through the structure, and a countdown. 34 hours, 33 hours, 32 hours. The creature was showing me exactly when the dam would fail. "Jesus Christ," whispered one of the investigators. "Look at the size of that thing." The lead investigator was on his backup radio, calling for military support. "This is Control 7. We need immediate air support. Repeat, immediate air support." But the creature's electromagnetic field was interfering with everything. His radio produced nothing, but static. "You're wasting your time," I told him. "It doesn't want to fight us. It's trying to save lives. That thing is responsible for dozens of deaths, maybe hundreds." "No," I said, understanding finally dawning. "It appears before disasters because it can sense them coming. It's been trying to warn people for centuries, but nobody listens." The creature tilted its head at my words, and I felt a wave of something like gratitude wash over me. For the first time in 200 years, someone understood. Then it spread its wings and launched itself into the storm, disappearing into the darkness. The investigators spent the next hour getting their equipment working again. When they finally re-established communications, the news was grim. A team of engineers had been sent to inspect the Summersville Dam following my anonymous tip about structural problems. They'd found hairline fractures throughout the main wall. "The dam is scheduled for emergency inspection tomorrow morning," the lead investigator told me. "If there really are serious structural issues, they'll begin controlled releases to reduce pressure." "What if they don't find the worst damage in time?" I asked. "Then we evacuate the valley. But that's 8,000 people, Mr. Crowthorne. You can't move that many people without solid evidence." I thought about Sarah, about the night she died. She'd been driving to the county emergency center trying to get someone to listen to her concerns about a bridge inspection report. The Silver Bridge. She'd found discrepancies in the safety reports, evidence that crucial repairs had been delayed for budget reasons. Nobody had believed her. They'd dismissed her as a hysterical housewife who didn't understand engineering. The bridge collapsed 3 weeks later. "She tried to warn them," I whispered. "Sarah tried to warn them about Point Pleasant." The investigator's face went pale. "What did you say?" "My wife. She wasn't just driving randomly that night. She was trying to get someone to listen about the bridge safety reports. That's why she died. Because she knew the bridge was going to fail." "That's impossible." Our investigation showed the Silver Bridge collapse was caused by a single faulty eye-bar, a random failure. Check the records. Check Sarah Crowthorne's employment history. She worked for the State Highway Department, Bridge Inspection Division. While they made their calls, I slipped out of the trailer and walked into the woods. The storm was getting worse, wind howling through the trees like the voices of the dead. Lightning revealed the creature's silhouettes circling overhead, keeping pace with me as I walked. I found a clearing and looked up at those red eyes. "Sarah's not really talking to me through the radio, is she?" I called out. "You're using her voice, her memory, because you know I'll listen to her." The creature landed gracefully in front of me, folding its enormous wings. Up close, I could see the intelligence in its eyes, ancient and sad. It had been trying to save people for so long, watching them ignore warning after warning, dying in disasters that could have been prevented. It touched my mind again, and this time I didn't resist. Images flowed between us. The dam failing in 31 hours, water rushing down the valley at 60 miles per hour, entire towns swept away in minutes. But also another image, emergency broadcasts starting immediately, evacuation routes opening, people fleeing to higher ground in time. If someone would just listen, if someone would just believe. "I believe you," I said, "but I need proof, something the authorities can't ignore." The creature studied me for a long moment, then reached into a pouch at its side. It pulled out something that made my breath catch. Sarah's wedding ring, the one that had been cut from her finger at the morgue. "How do you have that?" More images. Sarah's accident, but from a different perspective. The creature had been there tonight, watching from above as she raced toward town with her evidence about the bridge. It had tried to warn her about the drunk driver running the red light, but she couldn't hear its mental voice over her determination to save lives. The creature had stayed with her as she died, had taken the ring as a promise that her sacrifice wouldn't be forgotten. Every appearance since then had been an attempt to fulfill that promise, to make sure people listened to the warnings. "Show them," I said. "Show the investigators what you showed me." The creature shook its head, a remarkably human gesture. It couldn't communicate with them the way it did with me. My grief, my connection to Sarah, made me sensitive to its mental touch. Most people's minds were closed to it. That's why it needed me. I walked back to the compound, the wedding ring clutched in my fist. The investigators were waiting with grim faces. "Your wife did work for the highway department," the lead man admitted. "And she did file a report about structural concerns with the Silver Bridge. The report was buried in bureaucratic red tape." "Just like any report about the dam will be," I said, "unless we make them listen." I held out Sarah's ring. "This was buried with my wife 2 years ago. Ask me how I got it back." Before they could answer, every radio in the compound crackled to life simultaneously. But it wasn't Sarah's voice this time. It was a chorus of voices, hundreds of them. All the people who had died in disasters the creature had tried to prevent. "The water is coming," they said in unison. 29 hours, 8,000 lives. Make them listen." The voices faded, leaving us in stunned silence. "Gentlemen," I said, "I think it's time to make some calls." 28 hours until the dam failed. The investigators finally believed me, but belief and action are two different things. The military wanted to capture the creature for study. The engineers wanted more time to assess the dam's condition. The politicians wanted to avoid panic. Meanwhile, 8,000 people went about their normal lives in the valley below, completely unaware that a wall of water was racing toward them through time. I'd been awake for 36 hours straight, surviving on coffee and desperation. The creature, I'd started thinking of it as the guardian, perched on the radio tower outside, red eyes watching my every move. Occasionally it would touch my mind with updated countdown images. 27 hours, 26 hours. Time was running out. The inspection team found significant structural damage, the lead investigator reported. But they estimate it would take at least a week for critical failure to occur. They're not authorizing evacuation. "They're wrong," I said. "The Guardian can see stress patterns we can't detect. It knows exactly when the dam will fail." A creature from folklore is not acceptable evidence for mass evacuation, Mr. Crowthorne. That's when I made the decision that changed everything. I walked outside to the radio tower, looked up at the Guardian. I need you to show them, I said. All of them. Everyone in the valley. Make them see what's coming. The Guardian spread its wings, and I felt its reluctance. What I was asking would require enormous energy, perhaps more than it had. But it also understood that this might be the last chance to save those people. It launched itself into the storm, rising higher and higher until it was just a speck against the lightning-filled clouds. Then its eyes flared like searchlights, red beams cutting through the darkness. Every person within 50 miles suddenly experienced the same vision. Water. Millions of gallons of it, smashing through their homes, their schools, their churches. Cars tumbling like toys in a brown torrent. People screaming for help that would never come. Death approaching at 60 miles per hour. The visions lasted exactly 60 seconds. Then the Guardian's light faded, and it dropped from the sky like a stone, exhausted by the effort. I ran to where it landed, found it breathing hard but alive. Its eyes had dimmed to a faint glow. "Thank you," I whispered. The first emergency call came in 3 minutes later, then another, then hundreds. Every person in the valley had experienced the same terrifying vision, and they all wanted to know what it meant. The phone system crashed within an hour, but people didn't need phones to understand what they'd seen. They started evacuating on their own, loading cars with essential belongings and heading for higher ground. Traffic jams formed on every road leading out of the valley. The authorities had no choice but to coordinate the evacuation. "This is unprecedented," the emergency management director told me over the radio. "We've never had an entire population self-evacuate based on shared nightmares." "They weren't nightmares," I said. "They were prophecies." 24 hours until dam failure. The evacuation was going slower than needed. Too many people thought the visions were just mass hysteria, some kind of psychological phenomenon. They were staying in their homes, refusing to believe that disaster was coming. The Guardian was too weak to send another round of visions. It perched on my shoulder like an enormous, exhausted bat, occasionally touching my mind with countdown updates. 22 hours. 21 hours. That's when Sarah spoke to me one last time. "Vincent." Her voice came from the radio, clearer than it had ever been. "I need you to go to the dam. The evacuation isn't finished. People are still down in the valley. I know, but there's something else. The failure isn't just going to happen, it's being caused. Someone damaged the dam on purpose." My blood went cold. "What do you mean?" "The same people who buried my bridge report. The same people who don't want anyone to know about structural problems they could have fixed years ago. They're going to trigger a controlled failure and blame it on natural causes." The Guardian's eyes flared brighter at Sarah's words. It had sensed the artificial nature of the disaster, but hadn't been able to communicate that complexity to me before. "How much time do we have?" 18 hours. They're going to use small charges to weaken the dam at specific stress points. Make it look like natural failure. I looked at the Guardian. "Can you stop them?" The creature's mental touch was weak but determined. It could interfere with their equipment, maybe prevent the charges from detonating properly, but it would have to be at the dam when they tried to trigger the explosion. "That's a trap," I said. "They're probably planning to capture you during the confusion." The Guardian's response was a wave of acceptance. After 2 centuries of trying to save people, it was willing to sacrifice itself if that's what it took. "No," I said firmly. "We do this together." 17 hours until the planned failure. I commandeered a Park Service helicopter, telling the pilot it was an emergency rescue mission. The Guardian rode outside, claws gripping the landing skids, its presence causing the instruments to spin wildly. As we approached the dam, I could see work lights set up along the structure. Men in hard hats were placing devices at specific points along the wall, the charges Sarah had warned me about. "Set us down on the observation platform," I told the pilot. "Sir, I'm getting massive electromagnetic interference. The controls are barely responding. Just get us close." We landed hard on the concrete platform overlooking the dam. I jumped out, the Guardian launching itself toward the men with the charges. Its presence sent them scattering, their electronic detonators failing in the electromagnetic field. But there were backup systems, manual timers that couldn't be interfered with electronically. 15 minutes until the charges detonated. I ran along the top of the dam wall, pulling explosive charges and throws, winged them into the water. The Guardian flew alongside me, its claws ripping apart timing devices faster than human hands ever could. "Stop right there." The voice belonged to the thin investigator from the federal team. He stood at the far end of the dam with a rifle pointed at my chest. "You're interfering with a classified operation, Crowthorne. That creature has to be eliminated. 8,000 people are going to die. 8,000 people who've seen too much. The entity's psychic abilities make it a national security threat. This is the only way to eliminate it without causing mass panic." The Guardian perched beside me, eyes flaring with fury. I felt its rage at centuries of human stupidity, the endless cycle of people dying because others valued secrecy more than lives. 10 minutes until detonation. "You killed my wife," I said, understanding finally dawning. "She found out about your cover-ups. She was going to expose the bridge problems. Sarah Crowthorne was collateral damage, just like you'll be if you don't step away from that creature." The Guardian launched itself at the investigator, but the man was ready. He fired some kind of energy weapon that sent blue electricity crackling across the creature's body. The Guardian crashed to the concrete, stunned but not dead. 5 minutes. I could see the remaining charges blinking on the dam wall below us. Too many to disarm in time. The Guardian was struggling to get up, its electromagnetic field weakened by the weapon. That's when Sarah appeared. Not her voice over the radio this time, her actual form, translucent but unmistakably her, standing between me and the investigator. "Hello, Vincent," she said softly. "I'm sorry it took me so long to come home." "Sarah, how are you here?" The barrier between worlds is thin around the Guardian. It's been carrying messages from those of us who tried to warn people. We're all here, Vincent, everyone who died trying to prevent disasters. The investigator was backing away, his face pale with terror. "This is impossible. She's been dead for 2 years. 2 years of watching you cover up the truth," Sarah said, turning toward him. 2 years of watching more people die because you value your secrets more than human lives. 2 minutes until detonation. Sarah walked toward the investigator and other figures began materializing around her. Dozens of them. All the people who had died trying to warn others about impending disasters. The Silver Bridge victims. The Point Pleasant dead. Centuries of ignored prophets. The investigator's weapon fell from nerveless fingers. "Stay back. All of you. Stay back. We're not here for revenge," Sarah said. "We're here to finish what we started." The spirits spread out across the dam, each one moving toward a different explosive charge. As they touched the devices, the charges simply dissolved, their destructive potential neutralized by forces beyond human understanding. With 30 seconds to spare, the last explosive was eliminated. The Guardian rose to its feet, eyes blazing with renewed strength. The spirits of the dead had given it their energy, their final gift to the living. "It's over," I told the investigator. "The people are safe." But he was already gone, fled into the night rather than face the truth of what he'd seen. Sarah came back to me, her form growing fainter as dawn approached. "I have to go now, Vincent. We all do. Our work here is finished." "Will I see you again?" "Every time you look at the sky and see red eyes watching over people, you'll know we're there. All of us, working with the Guardian to prevent the disasters we can, and warning about the ones we can't." She reached out to touch my face, and for just a moment, I felt her hand warm against my cheek. "Live, Vincent. Live the life I couldn't finish." Then she was gone, along with all the others. The Guardian spread its wings and looked at me one last time. Its mental touch was gentle now, filled with gratitude and something like friendship. Then it took to the sky, circling once before disappearing into the dawn light. The official report blamed the near disaster on unprecedented seismic activity that weakened the dam structure. The successful evacuation was attributed to early warning systems and excellent emergency management coordination. The shared visions experienced by 8,000 people were dismissed as Mass hysteria triggered by atmospheric pressure changes. No mention of the Guardian, no mention of the spirits, no mention of the sabotage attempt. I resigned from the Park Service the following week. They offered me a promotion instead. Chief Ranger for the entire region, with a substantial raise and my pick of assignments. I turned it down. Some things are more important than career advancement. I moved to a small cabin outside Asheville, North Carolina, and set up my own consulting business. Disaster Early Warning Systems. That's what it says on my business cards. I help small towns and rural communities recognize the signs of impending natural disasters. Geological surveys, structural inspections, emergency preparedness planning. Most of my clients think I'm just very good at reading scientific data and weather patterns. They don't need to know about the other source of my information. The Guardian visits me every few months, usually just after midnight when the rest of the world is asleep. It perches on my porch railing and shares images of trouble spots around the country. Bridges showing stress fractures, dams with hidden weaknesses, mountainsides ready to slide. I pass along what I can through official channels, framing my warnings in terms of engineering analysis and risk assessment. Sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. But more people listen now than before. The Guardian's mass vision at Summersville changed something fundamental. People are more willing to believe in warning signs, more ready to evacuate when authorities recommend it. We've prevented 6 major disasters in the past year alone. Sarah Doe doesn't speak to me through the radio anymore. I think that was always the Guardian using her voice to get my attention, knowing I'd listen to her when I wouldn't listen to anyone else. But sometimes, when I'm sitting on my porch watching the sunset, I feel her presence beside me. Peaceful now. Content. Her work is finished. My work is just beginning. Last week, the Guardian showed me troubling images from a town in Oklahoma. Tornado patterns forming in ways that don't match normal weather models. Underground gas pockets shifting after recent fracking operations. A combination that could create a disaster unlike anything in recorded history. I'm flying out there tomorrow to begin preliminary surveys. People ask me sometimes why I do this work, why I spend my time chasing theoretical disasters that might never happen. I tell them it's about being prepared, about taking responsibility for our communities. But the real reason is simpler than that. I've seen what happens when we don't listen to warnings. I've watched good people die because others valued convenience over caution, profit over prophecy. The Guardian has been trying to save us for centuries. The least I can do is help it succeed. Every night before I go to sleep, I tune my radio to the emergency frequencies and listen for voices in the static. Not Sarah's voice, she's at peace now, but other voices, other warnings, other chances to save lives. Because somewhere out there in the darkness, red eyes are watching. And when disaster approaches, they're still trying to warn us. We just have to be willing to listen. My name is Gabriel Strongbear, and I've been a forest ranger for 20 years. I should have retired last month when I turned 48, but something kept me on Pine Mountain. Maybe it was my grandmother's voice in my head warning me about things that shouldn't be disturbed. Maybe it was just stubborn Cherokee pride. Either way, I wish I'd listened to that voice sooner. Pine Mountain runs along the Kentucky-Virginia border, like the spine of some sleeping giant. It's 125 miles of ridge that rises up to 4,145 feet, covered in thick forest that most folks never see. I know every trail, every cave, every hidden hollow. My grandmother used to say the mountain had memory, that it remembered the old Cherokee who lived here before the government forced them west on the Trail of Tears. Some families hid in these mountains rather than go. Their spirits never left. I'm half Cherokee myself. My grandmother raised me on stories and old ways after my parents died in a car crash when I was 8. She taught me the language, the songs, the medicines that grow wild up here. She also taught me about things that should stay buried. Some knowledge is dangerous, Gabriel, she'd say while weaving sweetgrass into protection bundles. The old shamans knew this. They locked certain powers away for good reason. I thought those were just stories until October 1979. It started when Dr. Sarah Mitchell arrived from the university with her archaeology team. They had permits to dig near Raven Cave, one of 7 sacred Cherokee sites my people sealed long ago. The tribal council had fought the permits for months, but the university lawyers won. Dr. Mitchell didn't care about our protests. She called our concerns primitive superstition and said her work would advance human knowledge. The first morning they arrived, I drove up to their camp to introduce myself. Standard procedure. I needed Taz. Oh no, who was working in my forest and what they were doing. Their camp sat in a clearing about half a mile from the cave entrance. 5 big green tents, generator humming, equipment everywhere. Dr. Mitchell was a tall woman with gray hair pulled back tight. She wore expensive hiking boots that had never seen real mud and a Cherokee bear claw necklace she'd probably bought at a tourist shop. When I explained I was the cultural liaison ranger and would be monitoring their work, she barely looked up from her charts. "We're very busy, Ranger," she said. "We have a limited window before winter sets in." "I understand that," I replied. "But this is sacred ground to my people. There are protocols." "Your people lost claim to this land over a century ago," she cut me off. "This is federal property now, and we have every right to conduct legitimate research." Her assistant, Jenny Carlisle, at least had the decency to look embarrassed. She was young, maybe 25, with kind eyes and dirty blonde hair. "We appreciate your concern," she told me quietly while Dr. Mitchell wasn't listening. "I studied some Cherokee history in college. I know this place is special." I liked Jenny right away. She reminded me of my grandmother when she was young, curious but respectful. I gave her my card and told her to call if anything seemed wrong. "The mountain can be dangerous," I said, "not just bears and cliffs. Sometimes the forest itself acts strange up here." She nodded like she understood, but I could tell she thought I was talking about normal wilderness dangers. That first week, everything seemed fine. The team worked methodically, setting up grids, taking photographs, documenting everything. I checked on them daily, always feeling uneasy but seeing nothing wrong. The weather stayed clear and cool, perfect October days with leaves turning gold and red, but the animals started acting strange. I first noticed it on Thursday morning. A doe stood at the edge of their camp, just watching, not grazing, not moving, just staring at the archaeologists with what looked like human curiosity. When I approached, she didn't bolt like deer normally do. She turned her head to look at me, and I swear her eyes held intelligence that made my skin crawl. "Weird, right?" Jenny said, walking up beside me. "She's been there for 20 minutes. The guys think it's funny, but it gives me the creeps." I pulled out my grandmother's old field glasses and studied the doe more carefully. Her stance was wrong. Too upright, weight distributed like she was thinking about standing on 2 legs instead of 4. Her ears moved too deliberately, tracking conversations instead of random sounds. "Maybe you should consider moving your camp," I suggested. Jenny frowned. "Why? It's just a deer." I wanted to explain that Cherokee animals don't usually study humans with such focus, that my grandmother's stories warned about creatures that wore animal shapes but thought like people. Instead, I just said, "Sometimes wildlife behavior changes when ancient sites are disturbed. It's probably nothing, but better safe than sorry." "I'll mention it to Dr. Mitchell," she said, but we both knew how that conversation would go. That evening, I sat in my cabin filling out daily reports and trying to shake the feeling that something was watching me through the windows. The forest was too quiet. No owls, no rustling in the brush, just heavy silence that pressed against the walls. I called my grandmother's sister, Aunt Mary, who still lived on the reservation in North Carolina. She was 93 and one of the few people left who remembered the old stories exactly as they'd been passed down. "They opened one of the sealed caves?" she asked when I explained the situation. "Not opened yet," I said, "but they're planning to excavate inside starting Monday." The phone went silent for so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Finally, Aunt Mary spoke in Cherokee, words I hadn't heard since it's my grandmother's funeral. Then she switched back to English. "Gabriel, you need to stop them. The 7 caves were sealed by the last medicine men before they died. What's inside was meant to stay buried." "What kind of things, Aunt Mary?" "The kind that steal skins, nephew. The kind that wear human shapes but hunt with animal minds. Your grandmother died trying to keep those seals strong. If they break into that cave. She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. I'd grown up on stories about skinwalkers, shamans who'd given up their humanity for power, creatures that could steal your identity by wearing your skin like clothing. I'd always figured they were just cautionary tales to keep kids from wandering alone in the forest. Now, watching that doe stare at the archaeological camp with human eyes, I wasn't so sure. Monday morning came gray and cold, with fog rolling down from the ridge like smoke. I arrived at the camp early, hoping to convince Dr. Mitchell one more time to reconsider their plans. The fog was thick enough that I could barely see the tents, and an unnatural quiet hung over everything. Jenny met me at the edge of camp, looking tired and worried. "Did you hear the sounds last night?" she asked. "What kind of sounds?" "Like singing, maybe? But not human. And footsteps circling our camp, but when we looked with flashlights, nothing was there." She hugged herself against the cold. "Dr. Mitchell says it was just wind and settling equipment, but it didn't sound like wind to me." I felt ice in my stomach. Cherokee spirits sometimes sang before something bad happened, but I couldn't tell her that without sounding crazy. "Maybe we should postpone the cave work until this weather clears." That's what I suggested, but Dr. Mitchell is determined to stay on schedule. She's already inside with Tom and Dave, setting up lights, the cave entrance. It was a dark slash in the limestone cliff about 30 feet up from the valley floor. The team had built a wooden platform and ladder system to reach it safely. I could see lights flickering, inside like fireflies. "Jenny," I said carefully, "has anyone on your team been having strange dreams?" She looked startled. "How did you know? I've been having the weirdest nightmares since we got here. Dreams about running through the forest on 4 legs, hunting something. I wake up exhausted, like I've been running all night." She paused. "Why? Is that normal for this area?" Before I could answer, screaming erupted from inside the cave. We both ran for the ladder. I went up first, my ranger training kicking in. The screaming came from Tom Henderson, the team photographer. I found him on his knees just inside the cave entrance, shaking and pointing deeper into the darkness. "It moved," he kept saying. "The bundle moved by itself." Dr. Mitchell stood over a stone platform where several leather bundles lay arranged in a circle. They looked ancient, bound with sinew and decorated with faded symbols I recognized from my grandmother's stories. Protection symbols, warning symbols. "Tom had a panic attack," Dr. Mitchell said dismissively. The lights created shadows that made objects appear to move, perfectly normal in close quarters. But Tom was pointing at one specific bundle, and I could see that the leather bindings were fresh cut, not rotted with age. Someone, or something, had recently opened it and tied it back up. "We should leave these alone," I said firmly. "These are sacred burial bundles. Disturbing them violates federal laws protecting Native American remains." "These aren't remains," Dr. Mitchell snapped. "They're cultural artifacts, and they belong in a museum where people can study them properly." She reached for the bundle Tom had been photographing. The moment her fingers touched the leather, the temperature in the cave dropped 20 degrees. Our breath came out in visible puffs, and the electric lights flickered. "Don't touch that!" I lunged forward. But it was too late. The bundle fell open, spilling out what looked like animal skins: bear, wolf, deer, others I couldn't identify. But these skins were wrong somehow. They moved slightly in the still air, and when light hit them right, I could see they had human handprints pressed into the fur from the inside. Dr. Mitchell picked up what looked like a bear pelt. "Fascinating preservation," she murmured. "The organic materials should have decomposed centuries ago." The moment she lifted the skin, something howled outside the cave. Not a wolf howl. Something trying to sound like a wolf, but getting it wrong, like a person who'd never heard one trying to imitate the sound. "We need to leave. Now." I was already backing toward the cave entrance. "Don't be ridiculous," Dr. Mitchell said, but her voice shook slightly. "It's just wildlife responding to our presence." The howl came again, closer this time, and was answered by 3 others from different directions. They were surrounding the cave. Tom scrambled to his feet and started grabbing his camera equipment. "I'm done. I'm not staying up here another minute." "You're all being irrational," Dr. Mitchell protested, but she was rewrapping the bundle with nervous fingers. We climbed down from the cave as fast as we could. The fog had gotten thicker, and shapes moved through it that might have been trees or might have been something else. As we reached the bottom, Dave Martinez, the team's anthropologist, came running from the direction of their camp. "Something's wrong with Jenny," he shouted. "She's acting really strange." We found Jenny standing in the middle of camp, perfectly still, staring up at the cave entrance. When Dave called her name, she turned to look at us, and my blood went cold. Her eyes had changed color from brown to pale yellow, and when she smiled, her teeth looked different, sharper, more like animals. "The bundles are awake now," she said in a voice that didn't quite sound like hers. "They've been waiting so long to wear skin again." Then she ran, not jogging, not stumbling. She ran on all fours into the forest, faster than any human should be able to move. We could hear her crashing through the underbrush, heading up toward the ridge. "What the hell just happened?" Tom's voice was barely a whisper. I knew exactly what had happened, but saying it out loud would make it real. Instead, I grabbed my radio and called for backup. "This is Ranger Strongbear requesting immediate assistance at Raven Cave Archaeological Site. We have a missing person acting erratically, possibly dangerous." While I made the call, Dr. Mitchell stood staring at the bundle in her hands. The leather had started to warm up, like something alive was moving inside it. "We should have listened to you," she said quietly. 3 hours later, we found Jenny's clothes scattered along the trail leading up to Pine Mountain. They were turned inside out and covered with animal fur that seemed to have grown right through the fabric. Her hiking boots were torn apart from the inside, as if her feet had suddenly become too big and wrong-shaped to fit. We never found Jenny herself. But that night, something wearing Jenny's face came back to camp. The thing that looked like Jenny appeared at the edge of our camp just after midnight. I was on watch duty, sitting by the dying fire with my rifle across my knees, when she stepped out of the tree line. In the dim light, she looked exactly like the Jenny we'd lost. Same clothes, same face, same nervous smile. "I'm okay," she called softly. "I got lost in the fog, but I found my way back. I'm sorry I scared everyone." But her voice was wrong. It had the right words and the right tone, but underneath I could hear something else, like an animal trying very hard to speak human language. "Stay where you are, Jenny," I said, not lowering my rifle. "Tell me something only you would know." She tilted her head in a way that looked natural but felt serious, completely wrong. "What do you mean, Gabriel? It's me. I gave you my card, remember? I studied Cherokee history in college." Those were things anyone in camp could have overheard. I stood up slowly, keeping the rifle ready. "What did you tell me about the deer that first day?" For just a moment, her face went blank. Then she smiled again. But this time I could see her teeth were too sharp. "I said it gave me the creeps. Can I come closer? It's cold out here." She started walking toward the fire, and I noticed she wasn't leaving footprints in the soft dirt. Also, she wasn't breathing. No visible puffs in the cold air. "That's close enough," I said, but she kept coming. "Don't you trust me, Gabriel?" Her voice was getting deeper, rougher. "I thought we were friends." Behind me, I heard tent zippers opening as the others woke up. Dr. Mitchell emerged first, took one look at Jenny, and screamed. The thing wearing Jenny's face wasn't quite right in the firelight. Her proportions were slightly off. Arms too long, fingers ending in what might have been claws, eyes that reflected light like an animal's. When she heard Dr. Mitchell scream, she grinned, and I could see her teeth had become fangs. "She opened the bundles," the Jenny thing said in a voice that was now clearly not human. "She woke us up after so many years sleeping. We're grateful." Tom came stumbling out of his tent with a flashlight. When the beam hit the creature, it hissed and took a step back. For a moment, its human disguise flickered, and I caught a glimpse of something with dark fur and yellow eyes wearing Jenny's face like a mask. "What do you want?" Dr. Mitchell managed to ask. "To wear skin again," it replied. "To walk in the world above ground. To hunt." It looked directly at me. Your grandmother was very strong. Her protections kept us bound for 20 years after she died. But you people broke the seals. Now we're free. Dave had been recording everything on his phone. The creature noticed and turned toward him with predatory interest. Pretty pictures, it said. We like pictures. They help us remember how to look human. It moved toward Dave with that wrong, flowing motion, too fast and smooth. I fired a warning shot into the air, and it stopped, more curious than frightened. Iron bullets won't kill us, it said, but they hurt. Your grandmother knew that. What happened to the real Jenny? I demanded. She's still here. The creature gestured to itself, wearing her memories like a warm coat. She knows you care about her, Gabriel. She's trying to scream warnings from inside, but we're much stronger. That broke something in Dr. Mitchell. She lunged forward with the ceremonial bundle she'd taken from the cave, holding it out like a weapon. Take this back. Take it and leave us alone. The creature laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Too late. The binding is broken. We don't need the old skins anymore. We can make new ones. It reached out and touched Dr. Mitchell's hand for just a second. She jerked away, but I saw something pass between them. A shadow that flowed from the creature into her skin. Now we have two, it said, with Jenny's stolen smile. Soon we'll have all of you. Then it melted back into the forest, moving like smoke. Dr. Mitchell stood staring at her hand where the creature had touched her. Already, dark lines were spreading up her arm under the skin like infection or frostbite. It's cold, she whispered. So cold. By morning, Dr. Mitchell was acting strange. She kept forgetting our names and referring to the camp as territory instead of a work site. When Tom tried to pack up the equipment, she snarled at him, actually snarled like a wild animal. We're not leaving, she said. This is our hunting ground now. Her eyes had started changing color, shifting from brown to yellow and back again. When she thought we weren't looking, she would sniff the air like she was tracking scents. I called for evacuation, but the helicopter couldn't land due to sudden bad weather that had moved in overnight. Fog so thick you couldn't see 10 feet, and wind that seemed to blow from all directions at once. The pilot said it looked like a localized storm system that made no meteorological sense. We were trapped on the mountain with whatever was taking over our friends. That afternoon, Dave disappeared while taking soil samples near the cave. We found his equipment scattered around, but no sign of him. His phone was still recording, and when I played back the last few minutes, I could hear him talking to someone. Jenny, is that you? Thank God, we've been so worried. Then the recording became garbled sounds, growling, tearing noises, and what might have been Dave screaming or something else making sounds like screaming. By evening, there were 3 of them. The Dave thing returned with the Jenny thing, and something new that wore Dr. Mitchell's face, but moved like a predator. They circled our camp just outside the firelight, talking to each other in voices that were almost human. The Cherokee one knows the old ways, the Mitchell thing said. He has protections. We'll need to be clever. The photographer has good eyes, replied the Dave thing. Useful for watching prey. The skinny one smells like fear, added the Jenny thing. Easy hunting. Tom was the skinny one. He'd been losing weight from stress and hadn't eaten anything since Jenny's disappearance. Now he sat by the fire, shaking and clutching his camera like a weapon. They're talking about us like we're dinner, he whispered. I pulled out my grandmother's protection bundle, sacred tobacco, sweetgrass, and other medicines wrapped in blessed cloth. When I opened it, the creatures stopped circling and moved back into the forest. That'll keep them away tonight, I told Tom. But these things are patient. They'll wait until we make a mistake. What are they? I'd been avoiding that question, but with 3 of our team already taken, there was no point in pretending anymore. Skinwalkers, I said. Cherokee shamans, who gave up their humanity for power. The tribal elders bound them in those cave bundles generations ago, but Dr. Mitchell broke the seals. Can we kill them? Maybe, but they're wearing our friends' bodies. If we kill the creatures, we might kill Jenny and the others too. Tom looked out into the darkness where things with familiar faces were hunting us. Are they still alive in there? I thought about what the Jenny thing had said about wearing memories like a coat, about the real Jenny screaming warnings from inside. I don't know, I admitted, but we're going to find out. The attack came just before dawn, when the protection bundle's power was weakest, and Tom had finally fallen asleep despite his terror. I was dozing myself when I heard movement around the camp, soft footsteps that tried too hard to sound normal. All three creatures approached from different directions, wearing the faces of our missing team members. In the gray pre-dawn light, they almost looked like real people coming back from an early morning hike. "Gabriel," the Mitchell thing called softly. "We need to talk." I grabbed my rifle and the protection bundle, nudging Tom awake. He jerked upright, immediately alert. "We've been thinking," the Dave thing continued, "and we have a proposition for you." "Stay back," I warned, but they kept coming. "Your grandmother was wise," said the Jenny thing. "She understood that some bargains benefit everyone. We don't want to hurt you. We want to work together." They formed a triangle around our camp, just at the edge of where the protection bundle's influence ended. Up close, I could see more clearly how wrong they were. Their skin had a waxy, artificial look, like mannequins. Their movements were too fluid, lacking the tiny imperfections that make humans look human. "What kind of bargain?" I asked, though I already knew I wouldn't like the answer. "Join us willingly," the Mitchell thing said. "Let us share your skin, and we'll let you keep your minds. You'll still be yourselves, just enhanced, stronger, faster, better at surviving in the wild." "And our friends?" "They're still here," the Jenny thing replied, "sleeping peacefully while we handle the dangerous work of staying alive. They dream happy dreams and never feel pain or fear." "That's not living," Tom said. "That's being a prisoner in your own body." The creatures exchanged glances, and I realized they were communicating somehow without words. When they looked back at us, their false human expressions had hardened. "Then you've made your choice," the Dave thing said. They attacked simultaneously. The Jenny thing moved like liquid shadow, flowing around our fire faster than I could track. I fired twice, hitting its center mass, but the bullets passed through like it was made of smoke. It reformed behind me and raked claws across my back, tearing through my jacket. Tom swung his camera tripod like a club, catching the Mitchell thing across the face. The blow should have broken bones, but instead the creature's head snapped around 180 degrees, grinned at us upside down, then rotated back to normal. "Iron hurts us," it said mockingly, "but you're using lead bullets." The Dave thing grabbed Tom by the throat and lifted him off the ground with one hand. Tom's feet kicked uselessly as the creature studied his face with clinical interest. "Pretty eyes," it murmured. "We'll take good care of them." I opened my grandmother's protection bundle completely, scattering sacred tobacco and burning sweetgrass. The creatures shrieked and fell back, their false human shapes flickering like bad television reception. For a moment I could see them as they really were, things made of shadow and hunger, wearing stolen skins like clothing. The skins were imperfect, like costumes. That didn't quite fit. Jenny's face was too tight around something with a wolf's skull. Mitchell's body contained something with too many joints. Dave's skin bulged and shifted as whatever was inside tried to find a comfortable position. "You can't keep us away forever," the thing in Jenny's skin snarled. "The protections will fade, and you'll get tired, and then we'll wear you like we wear them." But the sacred smoke had revealed something else. Thin silver cords that connected each stolen skin to something deeper in the forest. The real Jenny, Dave, and Mitchell were still alive somewhere, tethered to their bodies like balloon strings. "Where are they?" I demanded. "Where are you keeping our people?" "Close enough to feel everything we do with their bodies," the Dave thing laughed. "Far enough away that you'll never find them." The cords stretched back toward Pine Mountain, toward the 7 sacred caves. I understood suddenly what had happened. The creatures weren't just wearing our friends' appearances. They had dragged their souls back to the cave system and were keeping them imprisoned while they used their bodies. "The 7th cave, I'm bound," I said. "That's where you came from, and that's where you took them." The creature's expressions changed, becoming genuinely surprised. The Mitchell thing tilted its head like a curious animal. Clever, it admitted. Your grandmother's blood is strong in you. Yes, we keep the original skins in the deep places, safe and dreaming. But knowing doesn't help you. You can't reach them without becoming one of us. It was a challenge and a threat, but also information. If I could get to the seventh cave, I might be able to free the real Jenny, Dave, and Mitchell. But I'd have to get past 3 creatures that could become smoke, survive whatever other guardians they had, and somehow perform a ritual I only half remembered from childhood stories. The protection bundle was burning low. Soon its power would fade, and the creatures would attack again. I had maybe one chance to make it to the cave system alive. Tom, I said cues. Eatley, when I give the signal, run for the ATV. Drive down the mountain and get help. I'm not leaving you here alone. You're not a fighter, and I can't protect both of us. Get to town, find Aunt Mary's phone number in my contacts, and tell her what's happening. She'll know what to do. The creatures sensed we were planning something and began circling closer. The sweetgrass smoke was almost gone. I pulled the last item from my grandmother's bundle, a small knife with an iron blade, blessed with old Cherokee words and stained with the blood of medicine men from generations past. The moment I touched it, the creatures flinched. Iron, the Jenny thing hissed. Old iron, blessed iron, that will cut us. Good, I said, and charged. The sacred knife sliced through the Dave thing like it was made of fog. The creature shrieked and dissolved, its stolen form collapsing into shadow. For just a moment, I heard Dave's real voice screaming from somewhere far away. Then nothing. The other 2 creatures flanked me, more cautious now. Behind them, I could hear Tom starting the ATV. One cut and your friend is gone forever, the Mitchell thing warned. Is saving yourself worth murdering him? But I'd heard Dave scream when the creature dissolved. He was still alive somewhere, just disconnected. The knife didn't kill the skinwalkers. It separated them from their stolen bodies. Run, Tom! I shouted. The ATV roared to life. The Jenny thing spun toward the sound, and I threw the iron knife with all my strength. It caught the creature in the back, and Jenny's stolen form crumpled to the ground like an empty costume. Tom's ATV disappeared down the mountain trail, leaving me alone with the last creature. Now it's just you and me, the Mitchell thing said, but its voice shook. One old man with no weapons against something that has hunted these mountains for centuries. It was raw. Right about the weapons, but wrong about everything else. I wasn't just some old man. I was Cherokee, raised on stories of spirits and monsters, trained by a grandmother who had spent her life keeping these things contained. And I had something the creature didn't understand. I had nothing left to lose. The climb up to the 7th cave took 3 hours, with the Mitchell thing stalking me the entire way. It could have attacked at any time, but I think it was curious about what I planned to do. These creatures had been trapped for generations. They wanted to see how the last guardian's grandson would try to stop them. The cave entrance was different from the others, smaller, hidden behind a waterfall that ran red in the morning light. Cherokee legend said this was where the first skinwalkers had been created, back when desperate shamans made deals with dark spirits to protect their people from white settlers. The good intentions had been corrupted over time, and the protectors became predators. Inside, the cave opened into a vast chamber lit by some impossible source. The walls were covered with pictographs showing the history of the skinwalkers, shamans removing their own skins, spirits entering human bodies, the gradual corruption of sacred rituals into something hungry and evil. In the center of the chamber, 3 cocoons hung from the ceiling like giant spider eggs. Through the translucent walls, I could see human shapes. Jenny, Dave, and the real Dr. Mitchell, suspended in some kind of spiritual amber. Their eyes were open but vacant, their souls separated from their bodies but kept alive. Beautiful, isn't it? The creature wearing Mitchell's face stepped into the chamber behind me. We've been perfecting the process for centuries. Soon we'll have enough vessels to spread beyond this mountain. Around the edges of the chamber, I could see more cocoons in various stages of development. Some were empty, waiting for new victims. Others contained shapes that might once have been human, but were now something else entirely. This is where it ends, I said. Yes, the creature agreed. For you. But I wasn't talking to it. I was talking to my grandmother's spirit, calling on the protection rituals she'd taught me as a child. The cave filled with the scent of burning sweetgrass, and shadows deeper than the darkness began moving along the walls. The creature noticed and spun around, suddenly nervous. "What are you doing?" "What my grandmother should have done 20 years ago," I replied, and began to sing. The song was Old Cherokee, words that predated the arrival of white settlers, syllables that carried power accumulated over generations. As I sang, the pictographs on the walls began to glow, and the cocoons started shaking. "Stop!" the creature shrieked. "You don't understand what you're doing. We're the only thing standing between the world and worse things, things that would devour everything." Maybe that had been true once, when the first shamans made their sacrifice. But these creatures had forgotten their original purpose, become parasites feeding on human souls. The song reached its crescendo, and something fundamental shifted in the cave. The cocoons split open, releasing Jenny, Dave, and Mitchell. They fell to the stone floor, gasping and confused but alive. At the same time, the creature wearing Mitchell's face began to dissolve, its stolen form peeling away like old paint. Underneath was something that might have been human once, twisted by centuries of wearing other people's lives. It looked at me with eyes full of ancient sadness. "We only wanted to protect our people," it whispered. "I know," I said, "but protection that requires becoming a monster isn't protection at all." The original skinwalker faded away like smoke, finally at peace. The three archaeologists recovered quickly once their souls were reunited with their bodies. They remembered everything that had happened, but as if from a great distance, like recalling a half-remembered dream. We helped each other out of the cave and down the mountain, where Tom was waiting with search and rescue teams. The official report blamed the incident on a gas leak from natural cave formations that caused hallucinations and disorientation. The archaeological site was permanently closed due to geological instability, and Dr. Mitchell's team was relocated to safer projects. But I know the truth, and so do the others. Sometimes Jenny calls me late at night, worried about dreams where she runs through forests on 4 legs. Dave keeps checking his reflection in mirrors, making sure his face is really his own. Mitchell resigned from fieldwork entirely and now teaches anthropology at a small college where the most dangerous thing she encounters is plagiarized papers. I transferred to permanent cultural protection duty, spending my days making sure the 7 sacred caves stay sealed. The tribal council gave me official blessing to perform the old protection rituals, and Aunt Mary taught me the songs that keep dangerous spirits contained. Pine Mountain is quiet now, but it's not empty. Sometimes on foggy October nights I hear singing from deep in the forest, old Cherokee voices warning about boundaries that shouldn't be crossed. The mountain remembers what happened here, and so do I. My grandmother always said some knowledge should stay buried. She was right about that, but she was wrong about one thing. Sometimes that knowledge has to be dug up first, faced directly, and then buried properly. The skinwalkers are gone, but the world still has monsters. The difference is that now I know how to recognize them, how to fight them, and how to make sure they stay dead. Some nights, when the wind blows just right through the pine trees, I swear I can hear my grandmother's voice carried on the breeze. "Good work, grandson. But stay vigilant. The mountain has a long memory, and not all the old stories are finished yet." I always answer the same way. "Yes, grandmother, I'm watching." And I am. My name is Samuel Stillwater, and I spent 14 years as a forest ranger in the Cherokee National Forest. I wish I'd listened to my grandfather's warning about Devil's Hollow moonshine before I tasted what killed my partner. It was July 1978, the hottest summer Tennessee had seen in decades. The drought made the mountains crisp as old paper, and every creek ran low except for the spring-fed streams deep in the hollows. That's where the moonshiners worked their trade, hidden away from federal eyes like mine. I'd been hunting illegal stills for 3 years since my transfer from the Treasury Department. Used to be a revenue agent before I took this job. chasing bootleggers through the same mountains my grandfather once called home. The irony wasn't lost on me. Grandpa Stillwater had been a moonshiner himself back in the 20s, before he got religion and moved down to the valley. "Never drink the Devil's Hollow Shine, Sammy," he'd told me before he died. "Some bargains cost more than money." I thought he was just talking about bad liquor. Mountain folk love their ghost stories. My partner Jake Morrison had been with the Forest Service for 8 years when he died. Good man, careful with his work, never took unnecessary risks. We'd raided maybe 50 stills together, always by the book. Jake knew chemistry better than most college boys. He could tell you what was wrong with a batch just by smelling the mash. That's why his death made no sense. The explosion at the Murdoch still should have been impossible. Jake had tested the setup himself, declared it safe, even complimented old Pete Murdoch on his clean operation. Then something went wrong. The still erupted like a bomb, but the blast pattern was all wrong. Fire burned in directions that defied physics, and Jake died screaming about things that couldn't have been there. The official report called it a methanol flash. Back. I signed off on it because I had to, but I knew better. Jake Morrison didn't make mistakes with chemistry. Now the Treasury boys in Nashville were breathing down my neck about Devil's Hollow. Word was that someone up there was supplying moonshine to 3 states, stuff so good it commanded premium prices in Chicago and Atlanta. They wanted me to find the source and shut it down. "Probably just the old families working together," my supervisor said. "Murdochs, Kellys, and Prestons have been making shine up there since before your grandfather's time. Crack down hard, make some arrests, and they'll scatter like always." But I'd grown up hearing stories about Devil's Hollow. Families up there had been feuding over territory for generations, shooting at each other over creek access and still locations. The idea that they'd work together on anything seemed impossible, unless something was making them cooperate. The trail into Devil's Hollow started 4 miles from the nearest logging road, winding up through oak and hickory stands thick enough to hide an army. I'd been up there twice before, both times with backup, always in daylight. The place felt wrong somehow. Too quiet, like the birds knew to stay away. Local folks in the valley wouldn't talk about it. Ask about Devil's Hollow, and mountain people who'd normally chat your ear off would suddenly remember urgent business elsewhere. Even the game wardens avoided the area unless they absolutely had to check on something. The one person who'd talk was Billy Preston, youngest of the Preston clan. Kid couldn't have been more than 19, with the hollow-eyed look of someone who'd seen too much too young. He'd approached me at the diner in town, sliding into the booth across from me like he was afraid of being seen. "You're going up to the hollow, ain't you?" he'd whispered. "Just doing my job, son." "My job, too," he'd said, laughing bitterly. "Been born to it. But I'm telling you, Ranger Stillwater, don't drink nothing up there. Don't matter how thirsty you get." "Why's that?" Billy had looked around the diner, making sure nobody was listening. "Because some of it ain't made by people anymore." I'd tried to get more out of him, but he'd clammed up and left. Just another mountain boy spinning tall tales, I figured. I should have paid more attention. The morning I finally went up alone to investigate, the fog hung in the trees like spider webs. My radio crackled with static as soon as I hit the trail. Something about the ridge lines always interfered with signals. By the time I was 2 miles in, I might as well have been on the moon for all the contact I had with the outside world. That's when I started noticing things. The trees were wrong. Not dead or diseased, just arranged, like someone had been moving them around, planting them in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The trail split and rejoined itself in ways that made no sense, and I found myself checking my compass more and more often. Then I smelled it. The sweet, sharp scent of fermenting corn mash carried on a breeze that seemed to blow from 6 directions at once. I was getting close to something. I just didn't know what. The first still I found was a Kelly operation, tucked into a grove of rhododendron near a limestone spring. Nothing unusual about it, standard copper pot, corn mash bubbling away in wooden barrels, a neat stack of mason jars waiting to be filled. Nobody around, but the fire under the pot was still warm. I was photographing the setup when I heard footsteps. Tom Kelly emerged from the trees carrying an armload of split wood. He was a man about my age, weathered face and steady hands. the kind who'd been making shine since he could walk. "Morning, Ranger," he said, polite as you please. "Come to shut me down?" "Just doing my job, Tom." He set down the wood and studied me. "You Samuel Stillwater? Old Pete Stillwater's grandson?" "I am." "Pete was a good man. Made clean shine. Treated folk. Was fair." Tom pulled out a mason jar, clear liquid sloshing inside. "This here's from my family recipe. 3 generations old, same as we've been making it. You want a taste?" I should have said no. Federal agents don't sample evidence. But something about the way he offered it, the respect in his voice when he mentioned my grandfather, made me nod. The moonshine went down smooth as silk. Clean, honest corn liquor with just enough bite to remind you what it was. Nothing supernatural about it, just good mountain craftsmanship. "That's fine work," I admitted. "Appreciate it. But I gotta ask you something, Ranger." Tom's expression turned serious. "You planning to go deeper into the hollow?" "I might." "Don't." He said it flat, no argument in his voice. "Whatever them Treasury boys in Nashville are paying you, it ain't enough." "Why's that?" Tom looked up toward the ridgeline, where the trees seemed to grow in impossible spirals. "Because there's worse things than federal prison waiting up there." Before I could ask what he meant, he'd packed up his operation with practiced speed and disappeared into the woods. I was left standing there with the taste of good moonshine on my tongue and a growing sense that I was missing something important. The second still was different. I found it in a clearing where no grass grew, surrounded by stakes driven into the ground in a perfect circle. The setup was elaborate. 3 copper pots connected by a maze of pipes, feeding into collection barrels arranged in patterns that reminded me of something I'd seen in a book about witchcraft. This was a Murdoch operation. Had to be, based on the location. But it was like no still I'd ever seen. The mash was working without any heat source. No fire, no gas burners, nothing. The corn mixture bubbled and steamed as if it was boiling, but the copper pots were cold to the touch. I took samples, photoged, rafed everything, tried to make sense of what I was seeing. The liquid coming out of the condenser coils was clear as water, but thick as honey, and it moved wrong somehow. Flowing uphill in places, gathering in puddles that reflected things that weren't there. That's when I noticed the smell, not the sweet scent of fermenting grain, but something else. Something that reminded me of sulfur and burnt copper and things that had been dead too long. I was sealing the last sample jar when I heard breathing behind me. Pete Murdoch stood at the edge of the clearing, older than I remembered. His face carved deep with lines that hadn't been there when Jake and I had raided his regular still 6 months ago. He was carrying a shotgun, but it was pointed at the ground. "You shouldn't be here, boy," he said. "Just collecting evidence, Pete." "Evidence of what? You think this is my doing?" He gestured at the impossible still. "You think I know how to make mash work without fire? Then whose is it?" Pete's laugh was bitter. "Same person it's always belonged to. Same person who's been making shine in this hollow since before your grandfather was born. Problem is, that person's been dead for 80 years. I thought he was trying to scare me off with ghost stories. Mountain people are superstitious, and they'll say anything to protect their livelihood. But something in his voice made me listen. "Ezekiel Murdoch," Pete continued, "my great-great-grandfather, made a deal back in 1897 when the revenuers were closing in and the family was starving. Sold his soul for the perfect recipe and protection from the law. Pete, contract's still binding, boy. Demons still here, still making shine, and every year it wants payment." He left me standing there with a jar of impossible moonshine in my hand and questions I didn't want to ask. By the time I reached the third still, the Preston operation, the sun was getting low and the shadows were stretching long across the hollow. This setup was traditional, nothing supernatural about it, but the location made my skin crawl. The still sat in the center of what looked like an old cemetery. Broken headstones jutted from the ground like rotten teeth, and the mash barrels were positioned directly over what might have been graves. Sarah Preston was waiting for me. An old woman, bent with age but sharp-eyed, stirring a batch of mash with a wooden paddle worn smooth by decades of use. "You're Pete Stillwater's boy," she said without looking up. "Grandson?" "Same thing. You got his look about you. He was smart enough to leave when the leaving was good." "What should he have left?" Sarah finally looked at me, and I saw fear in her eyes. Real fear, the kind that comes from knowing something terrible and being powerless to stop it. "The bargain," she said. "The thing that keeps us all in line, keeps us all working together when we should be shooting each other over territory." She gestured at the hollow around us. "You think 3 families that have been feuding for 100 years just decided to cooperate for no reason?" "What kind of bargain?" Instead of answering, she dipped a cup into one of her barrels and held it out to me. The liquid inside was clear but seemed to move with its own life, swirling in patterns that made my eyes water. "Taste it," she said. "Then you'll understand." Every instinct told me not to. But I'd already tasted Tom Kelly's shine without consequence, and I needed to understand what was happening in this hollow. I took the cup and drank. The world exploded. Suddenly, I was standing in a place that wasn't the hollow, wasn't anywhere on Earth. The sky was the color of old blood, and the air tasted like copper and sulfur. Mountains of distilled spirits stretched to the horizon, tended by figures that might have been human once, but were something else now. And in the center of it all was a still. Not copper, but something that looked like bone and charcoal, tended by a thing that wore to the shape of a man, but moved like smoke and shadow. It turned to look at me, and I saw Ezekiel Murdoch, or what was left of him. "Welcome, Samuel Stillwater," it said, and its voice was the sound of liquor boiling in hell's own pot. "I've been waiting for you." Then I was back in the hollow, on my knees in the dirt, with Sarah Preston's worried face looking down at me. "Now you know," she said softly. "Now you understand what we're all bound to." I spent that night in my truck at the mouth of the hollow, afraid to drive the winding mountain roads with whatever Sarah Preston had given me still burning in my system. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that hellish distillery and the thing that had once been Ezekiel Murdoch. By morning, I'd convinced myself it was just a hallucination. Bad moonshine could do that, make you see things that weren't there, especially if it was contaminated with methanol or other chemicals. Mountain moonshiners weren't chemists, and accidents happened. But when I checked my evidence kit, the samples I'd collected were different. The liquid from Tom Kelly's still was normal, clear grain alcohol that smelled like corn and tasted clean. But the stuff from the supernatural still had changed overnight. It was darker now, almost amber, and it moved in the jar like it was alive. When I held it up to the light, shapes formed and dissolved in the liquid. Faces, maybe, or things that might have been faces once. The sample from Sarah Preston Cemetery still was worse. The jar was warm to the touch, and the contents glowed with a faint light that had nothing to do with chemistry. I needed help, real help, from someone who understood what I was dealing with. The problem was, everyone who might know the truth was part of whatever was happening in the hollow, except for Billy Preston. I found him at the auto parts store in town, working behind the counter and looking like he hadn't slept in weeks. When he saw me, his face went white. "You went up there," he said. It wasn't a question. "I need to know what's really going on, Billy." He looked at Rhodes. "On the store," making sure we were alone, then locked the door and flipped the sign to closed. "My great-great-grandmother made me promise never to tell," he said. "But I can't watch another federal agent die for nothing." We sat in his back office, surrounded by carburetor parts and fan belts, while Billy told me the truth about Devil's Hollow. "It started in 1897, he said. Ezekiel Murdoch was the best moonshiner in 3 counties, but the revenuers were closing in. Federal marshals had raided every still in the hollow, arrested most of the men, and the families were starving. Story goes that Ezekiel was desperate, had a wife and 5 children, and winter was coming on. He went up to the high hollow, to a place where the old Cherokee said spirits walked, and he called out for help. And something answered? Billy nodded. Demon, devil, whatever you want to call it, offered Ezekiel a deal: protection from the law, the perfect moonshine recipe, and enough money to keep the families fed. All it wanted in return was 1 soul a year. 1 soul from who? Anyone from the 3 families. Murdochs, Kellys, Prestons. We take turns. Billy's hands shook as he lit a cigarette. My cousin Mary was chosen last year. Sweet girl, just turned 16. They found her body at the Devil's Still, and the official cause of death was alcohol poisoning. I thought about my partner Jake, about the impossible explosion that had killed him. The federal agents who've disappeared count toward the bargain. Demon don't care where the souls come from, long as it gets one every year. Billy looked at me with hollow eyes. This year's my turn, Ranger Stillwater. They're coming for me in 3 days, at the new moon. We can get you out of here. Witness protection, new identity. Won't work. Contract follows the bloodline wherever we go. Only way to break it is to destroy the original AGR. Meant, but that's kept at the Devil's Still. And nobody who's gone up there alone has ever come back. I spent the rest of the day researching everything I could find about Devil's Hollow. The local library had newspaper clippings going back to the 1890s, and the pattern was clear once I knew what to look for. 1898. Revenue agent Marcus Webb disappears during raid on moonshine operation. Body never found. 1902. Federal Marshal Thomas Clay killed in still explosion. Witnesses describe unnatural fire. 1908. 3 revenue agents vanished during sweep of Devil's Hollow. Equipment found arranged in circle around abandoned still. The list went on, year after year. Always 1 death annually. Always someone connected to law enforcement or from one of the 3 families. And always near the new moon. But there were gaps. Years when nobody died, when the pattern was broken. I cross-referenced those dates with everything I could find, and finally discovered the connection. 1923. No deaths reported. Same year, my grandfather, Pete Stillwater, left the Hollow and moved to the valley. 1934. No deaths reported. Year of the Great Revival, when traveling preacher Josiah Miller held services throughout the mountains. 1957. No deaths reported. Year the old Cherokee medicine man John Running Bear died, but not before blessing all the springs in the Hollow. Someone had fought the demon before. Someone had found a way to break the bargain, at least temporarily. I needed to find out how. That evening, I drove up to the old Cherokee reservation, looking for anyone who might remember John Running Bear. Most of the elders had died or moved away, but I found one old woman who remembered. Running Bear fought many dark spirits, she told me, but the whiskey demon was the worst. Fed on souls like a vampire feeds on blood, grew stronger every year. How did he stop it? Blessed water. Holy water from the white man's church mixed with water from the sacred springs. Poured it into the demon's still, broke its power for a generation. She studied me with eyes that had seen too much. But demons don't die, young man. They just sleep. And this one's been awake again for 20 years. I had a plan forming. Dangerous. Probably impossible. But it was all I had. The next morning I visited every church in 3 counties, collecting holy water from pastors who thought I was crazy but were willing to help. Then I drove to the valley where my grandfather was buried, looking for his old cabin. I found it collapsed into ruin, but the root cellar was still intact, and there, wrapped in oiled cloth and hidden under the floorboards, was my grandfather's journal. The entries from 1923 told the whole story. Grandpa Pete had been chosen as that year's sacrifice, but instead of accepting his fate, he'd fought back. Working with Preacher Miller and John Running Bear, he'd located the Devil's Still and contaminated its contents with blessed water. The demon screamed like a train whistle when the holy water hit its moonshine, he'd written. Still exploded in fire that burned cold instead of hot, and the thing that looked like Ezekiel Murdoch melted like snow in July. Thought we'd killed it for good, but Running Bear warned me, said we'd only wounded it, and it would heal eventually. The last entry was dated the day before he left the Hollow. Demon's contract is still binding, but its power is broken. Won't last forever, though. Someday someone else will have to finish what we started. Pray it ain't one of my blood. I had everything I needed except courage. And with Billy Preston's life hanging in the balance, I'd have to find that too. The next night was the new moon. Time was running out. I went up the hollow just after midnight, carrying a backpack full of holy water and my grandfather's journal. The night was black as pitch, with clouds covering even the stars, and every shadow seemed to move with its own purpose. The trail was different in the dark, paths that chose. It had been clear in daylight, now twisted back on themselves, leading me in circles through trees that shouldn't have been there. My flashlight beam seemed to die just a few feet ahead of me, swallowed by darkness that felt thick as molasses. But I wasn't alone. I could hear them following me, footsteps that matched my own, breathing that echoed my breathing, whispers in a language I didn't recognize but somehow understood. The demon's servants, hunting for this year's sacrifice. They were hunting Billy Preston, and they'd found him. I discovered the boy tied to a tree near the devil's still, unconscious but alive. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead, and his breathing was shallow. Around him, 3 figures moved in the darkness: Pete Murdoch, Tom Kelly, and Sarah Preston, their eyes reflecting light like animals. "Let him go," I called out, stepping into the clearing. They turned toward me, and I saw that they weren't entirely human anymore. Something had changed them, twisted them into servants of whatever dwelt in this place. "Samuel Stillwater," Sarah Preston said, but her voice carried echoes that came from somewhere else. "Pete's grandson. We wondered if you'd come." "The boy's innocent." "Innocents don't matter," Tom Kelly replied. "Contract calls for 1 soul per year from the 3 families. Billy's blood is Preston blood, and his time has come. Then take me instead." They laughed, and the sound made my teeth ache. "You're not family," Pete Murdoch said. "Your blood won't satisfy the bargain. But don't worry, you won't be leaving here either." That's when I saw it. The devil's still, hidden in the shadows at the far end of the clearing. It wasn't made of copper or any earthly metal. The thing looked like it had grown from the ground itself. Twisted metal that might have been bone, pipes that pulsed like veins, and a firebox that burned with cold flame. The whole apparatus radiated wrongness, a presence that made reality bend around it. And tending it was Ezekiel Murdoch, or what was left of him. The thing that had once been a man was tall and gaunt, its skin burned black as charcoal, its eyes like coals in a furnace. Copper pipes ran through its body where veins should have been, and when it moved, I could hear liquid sloshing inside it. "Welcome to my distillery, Samuel Stillwater," it said, and its voice was the sound of steam escaping from hell's own boiler. "Your grandfather cost me 20 years of proper harvest. I've been looking forward to meeting his blood." "The contract's broken," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "John Running Bear destroyed your power. Wounded it, weakened it. But contracts written in blood and signed with souls don't break so easily." The demon gestured to the still, where liquid bubbled and steamed without any visible heat source. "Every year I grow stronger. Every soul I claim makes the bargain harder to break. Soon I'll have power enough to expand beyond this hollow, to claim tribute from every family in these mountains." I understood then why the Treasury Department had sent me here. This wasn't about shutting down moonshine operations. This was about stopping something that would spread like a plague if it wasn't contained. The demon raised one burned hand, and the 3 family members began advancing on Billy. The boy was awake now, struggling against his bonds, but there was nowhere for him to run. I pulled out the first bottle of holy water and smashed it against the nearest copper pipe. The demon shrieked like a steam whistle as white smoke rose from where the blessed water had touched its still. The sound was so loud it knocked me to my knees, and the 3 family members staggered backward, clutching their ears. 20 years I've waited for revenge," the demon hissed, advancing on me. 20 years of diminished power, of having to make do with lesser souls. You think a few drops of church water will save you? But the holy water was working. The demon still was shuddering, its impossible flames flickering, and the liquid inside was turning dark and thick. I smashed the second bottle against the firebox. More smoke, more screaming, and this time the demon stumbled, its form becoming less solid. "The contract!" it roared. "Where is the contract?" I looked around wildly and saw it. A piece of parchment nailed to a dead tree at the edge of the clearing, covered in writing that seemed to shift and move in the darkness. That had to be the original agreement, the document that bound the 3 families to this hell. I ran for it, but the demon was faster. It grabbed me with hands that burned like dry ice, lifting me off the ground. "You'll make a fine addition to my collection," it whispered. "Your grandfather's soul has been calling to me for decades. Soon you can join him." That's when Billy Preston broke free of his ropes. The kid had been working on them while we'd been talking, and now he sprinted across the clearing toward the contract. "Billy, no!" Sarah Preston screamed. But it was too late. The boy reached the document and began tearing it apart with his bare hands. The effect was immediate. The demon dropped me, howling in rage and pain, as the parchment crumbled to ash. The impossible still began to collapse, its twisted metal dissolving like sugar in rain. But the demon wasn't finished. "If I can't have souls by contract," it snarled, "I'll take them by force." It lunged at Billy, but I was ready. I emptied the last bottle of holy water directly onto the creature's burning form. The demon exploded in cold fire that lit up the entire hollow. When the light faded, nothing remained but a pile of ash and the scattered remains of the supernatural still. The 3 family members collapsed, suddenly human again, blinking in confusion as whatever had been controlling them released its hold. "It's over," Billy gasped, still holding the ashes of the contract. Finally over. But even as I helped him to his feet, I could feel something watching us from the deeper shadows of the hollow. The demon was gone, but this place had been touched by hell for too long. Some stains never wash clean. We brought the 3 family members down from the hollow that night, all of them confused and traumatized by their years as the demon's servants. The local doctor treated them for exposure and dehydration, and by morning they were asking the same question. How long have we been up there? For Sarah Preston, it had been 15 years. For Tom Kelly, 12. Pete Murdoch couldn't remember anything past 1965. The demon had taken more than their freedom. It had stolen years of their lives, turning them into guardians for its supernatural moonshine operation, while their families below believed they were hiding from the law. My official report was simple. Major moonshine operation shut down, equipment destroyed, suspects fled the area. Nobody asked too many questions. Federal agents have bigger problems than mountain moonshiners, and the Treasury Department was satisfied as long as the illegal liquor stopped flowing. But I knew the truth was more complicated. Billy Preston left Tennessee a week later, heading west to start over somewhere the mountain shadows couldn't reach him. Before he left, he stopped by my office with a warning. "Thing is, Ranger Stillwater," he said, "demons don't really die. They just go somewhere else for a while. You think it's still out there? I think something that spent 80 years in one place leaves marks that don't fade easy. And I think there's other hollows in these mountains, other places where desperate people might make desperate bargains." He was right, of course. Over the next year, I investigated 3 more supernatural moonshine operations in remote areas of the Cherokee National Forest. Each one was smaller than Devil's Hollow, easier to shut down, but they all followed the same pattern. Desperate families, impossible stills, and contracts sigh. In blood. Word had gotten out somehow. The demon's influence had spread before we destroyed it, planting seeds in other communities where poverty and isolation made people vulnerable to supernatural solutions. I developed a reputation as the ranger who handled unusual cases. Other agents started calling me when they found stills that operated without heat sources, or moonshine that glowed in the dark, or family operations where nobody could remember how long they'd been making liquor. I kept my grandfather's journal, and I added to it locations of destroyed supernatural stills, families freed from demonic contracts, and methods that worked against creatures that fed on human desperation. Holy water was effective, but temporary. The real solution was economic, helping families find legitimate work, connecting them with social services, breaking the cycle of poverty that made them vulnerable to supernatural predators in the first place. By 1983, I'd been promoted to supervisor and transferred to a desk job in Knoxville. Officially, my moonshine hunting days were over, but I still get calls from rangers in the field, young agents who've found something they can't explain in the deep hollows where civilization fears to tread. Last month, it was a still that operated itself in the Daniel Boone National Forest. Month before that, a family in the Smoky Mountains who couldn't remember how they'd learned to make moonshine that caused hallucinations. The war isn't over. Maybe it never will be. But every family we save, every supernatural contract we destroy, makes the mountains a little safer for the people who call them home. I keep a bottle of holy water in my desk drawer now, next to my grandfather's journal and a flask of clean mountain moonshine made by Tom Kelly, who learned to make honest liquor after we freed him from the demon's influence. Sometimes, late at night when the wind blows just right through the mountains, I can still smell sulfur and burnt copper. On those nights, I check my equipment, review my notes, and wait for the next call. Because somewhere in these ancient hills, in hollows where the sun never quite reaches and the old stories still have power, something is always waiting for the next desperate soul willing to make a deal with the devil. And when it does, I'll be ready. The mountains remember everything, and so do I. My name is Jonathan Bloodworth, and I've been a ranger in these North Carolina mountains for 16 years. That's long enough to know every trail, every ridge, every hollow where poachers like to set up camp. Long enough to know when something ain't right. It was October 1974, and the harvest moon was coming. The leaves were turning faster than usual that year, painting Grandfather Mountain in colors so bright they almost hurt your eyes. But something was off about the whole season. The deer weren't where they should be. The bears had moved their dens. Even the birds seemed confused, flying south weeks early like they were running from something. I lived alone in a cabin about 5 miles up the Blue Ridge Parkway, far enough from town that I could go days without seeing another soul. That's how I liked it. Been that way since I got back from Korea, and especially since I lost my family. A rabid bear took my wife Sarah and my boy Tommy while I was overseas. Found them when I came home on leave. Sometimes I wonder if things would have been different if I'd taught them more about the woods, about respecting what's wild instead of fearing it. The forest was my peace now. Every morning I'd walk the same trails, checking for illegal hunting signs, making sure the wildlife was protected. I knew every sound these mountains made. The way oak leaves rustle different from maple, how a deer moves through brush compared to a man trying to be quiet. That October morning started like any other. Coffee at sunrise, then out with my rifle and ranger gear to patrol the hunting grounds. The Cherokee used to call this area sacred hunting land, said their ancestor Kanati blessed these mountains. Old stories, but the Cherokee folks I knew still spoke of them with respect. I was checking trail markers near Devil's Courthouse when I first noticed something wrong. My boots crunked, shed through leaves that should have been green for another month. The air was too warm, like summer was fighting back against fall. And there was a smell. Not bad exactly, but wild and sharp, like metal mixed with pine sap. Then I saw the marks. They were carved into the bark of an old oak tree, symbols I didn't recognize. Not the usual initials or dirty pictures hunters like to leave. These were different, circles and lines that seemed to mean something important. The cuts were fresh, sap still sticky and bright. I touched one of the marks and felt a chill run up my arm, even in that strange, warm air. The forest went quiet around me. No birds, no squirrels, no wind in the leaves, just silence so complete it made my ears ring. That's when I heard the scream. It came from deeper in the woods, high and desperate like a man in terrible pain. I'd heard plenty of screams in Korea, knew the difference between fear and dying. This was both. I grabbed my rifle and ran toward the sound, my boots sliding on leaves that seemed too bright, too perfect. The scream came again, weaker this time, then stopped altogether. The silence that followed felt hungry. When I reached the source, I found Jerry Walsh's hunting camp. Jerry was a local guide who sometimes bent the rules but never broke them bad enough for me to worry about. His tent was still standing, coffee pot still warm on the fire. But Jerry was gone. His rifle lay in the dirt, unfired. His boots sat neat by the tent like he'd just stepped out of them. But there was blood on the ground, dark drops leading into the thick woods where the shadows seemed deeper than they should be. I called his name, but the forest swallowed my voice. Whatever had taken Jerry, it had been quiet about it. Quiet and quick and thorough. I should have radioed for backup then. Should have followed procedure and called in a missing person, but something about those carved symbols, about the way the woods felt wrong, made me think this wasn't a normal disappearance. As I stood there in Jerry's empty camp, the sun started setting earlier than it should have. And somewhere in the distance I heard something that made my blood run cold. The sound of footsteps moving through the forest, steady and patient, like something was hunting, something that knew these woods even better than I did. I spent that night in my cabin checking and rechecking the locks, though I couldn't say why. Been living in these mountains my whole adult life, never felt the need to lock doors before, but something was watching me. I could feel eyes on the windows even with the curtains drawn. Come morning, I found tracks around my house. They were human-shaped, but wrong somehow. Too deep for a normal man's weight, too perfectly spaced like the walker was floating between steps. And the stride was longer than any person I'd ever tracked, nearly 6 feet between prints. I followed them into the woods until they just stopped. Middle of a clearing, no rocks or trees or streams to explain it. The tracks ended like whatever made them had just lifted off into the air. That's when I found the second camp. This one belonged to 3 hunters from Virginia, weekend warriors with more money than sense. Their fancy gear was scattered everywhere. Expensive rifles, camouflage that probably cost more than my truck, GPS devices that wouldn't work worth a damn in these deep hollows anyway. But the hunters themselves were gone, and this time there was a lot more blood. It wasn't random violence, though. Somebody had arranged the scene like a message. The men's sleeping bags were laid out in a perfect triangle, their boots lined up neat at the foot of each one. Their rifles were stacked in the center like they were making some kind of offering. And hanging from the trees around the camp were animal bones, deer skulls, bear claws, bird wings, all arranged in patterns that reminded me of those symbols I'd seen carved in the oak. Like someone was writing a letter in a language I couldn't read. I was studying the bone arrangements when I heard him. A man's voice, weak and scared, calling for help from deeper in the woods. I grabbed my rifle and followed the sound, my heart pounding against my ribs. The voice led me through thick underbrush, over fallen logs, down into a hollow where the air was cold despite the unseasonably warm weather. I found him tied to a tree. It was Buck Morrison, one of the Virginia hunters. He was alive, but barely, his face white as paper and his hands shaking like leaves. There were cuts on his arms and chest, not deep enough to kill, but precise, like someone had been very careful about causing just the right amount of pain. "Cut me loose," he whispered when he saw me. "Please, God, cut me loose before it comes back." I got out my knife and started sawing through the ropes. "What happened to your friends? Where are the other 2? Buck's eyes went wide with terror. "It took them first. Made me watch. Oh, Jesus, Ranger. It made me watch what it did to them." "What took them? Who did this?" "Not who," Buck said, and his voice dropped to almost nothing. "What?" "Something that hunts like a man but ain't human. Something that knows every secret of these woods." The ropes finally parted and Buck collapsed into my arms. He was lighter than he should have been, like fear had burned the meat right off his bones. "We were hunting deer," he whispered. "Just deer, I swear. But it said we were hunting wrong, killing for sport instead of need. Said we had to pay the price." "What did? What said that?" Buck looked up at me with eyes that had seen too much. "The Moon Hunter. That's what it called itself. Said it was here to judge us, to see if we deserve to live." A branch cracked somewhere in the darkness beyond the trees. Buck grabbed my arm so tight I thought he might break it. "It's coming back," he said. "It always comes back when the moon gets full." I looked up through the canopy and saw that silver light beginning to show between the leaves. The harvest moon was rising, and suddenly the air felt electric, like the moment before lightning strikes. "Can you walk?" I asked Buck. He nodded and tried to stand, but his legs gave out. I caught him and threw his arm over my shoulder, half carrying him back toward the main trail. Behind us, I could hear something moving through the forest, not crashing through like a bear or a man, but gliding between the trees like it belonged there, like it had always belonged there. We made it maybe 100 yards before I saw the eyes. They glowed silver in the moonlight, watching us from behind a massive pine tree. Too high off the ground to be human, too steady to be an animal. And there was intelligence in them, cold and ancient and judging. "Don't look back," I told Buck, but he was already turning around. When he saw those eyes, he made a sound I'd never heard before, half scream, half prayer. His weight went dead in my arms as he fainted, and I had to drag him the rest of the way to my truck. As I loaded Buck into the passenger seat, I felt something watching me. I turned around and saw a figure standing at the edge of the clearing, just barely visible in the moonlight. It was tall, maybe 8 feet, with long silver hair that moved in a wind I couldn't feel. Its skin looked like moonlight on water, pale and shifting. And those eyes, those silver eyes, seemed to see right through me, reading everything I'd ever done, every choice I'd ever made. The figure raised one hand, and I saw it was holding something. A bow made of what looked like starlight and shadow. On the string was an arrow that glowed like captured moonbeams. Then it spoke, and its voice was like wind through autumn leaves. "Jonathan Bloodworth," it said, and hearing my name in that voice made my soul feel cold. "We need to talk." I jumped in the truck and gunned the engine, spraying gravel as I tore out of there. In the rearview mirror, I saw the figure standing perfectly still, watching us go. But I knew it wasn't over. Whatever that thing was, whatever it wanted with me, this was just the beginning. The harvest moon was getting fuller every night, and something told me I was running out of time. Buck Morrison spent 3 days in the hospital before he could talk straight. When he finally did, his story made my blood run cold. "It picked us off one by one," he told me, his voice shaking. "Started with Tommy. He was taking a leak behind some trees when we heard him scream. When we found him, he was hung up like a deer, gutted clean and bled out. Buck's hands wouldn't stop trembling. Then it got Richards, dragged him right out of his sleeping bag while we were trying to stay awake. We heard him begging, heard him crying for his mama. But when morning came, all we found were his boots and this pile of bones arranged in some kind of pattern." "What kind of pattern?" I asked. "Like words, but not in English. Like it was trying to tell us something about the way we hunted, about taking more than we needed." I'd been having nightmares since that night in the woods. Dreams where something silver and tall followed me through the forest. Always just out of sight, but never far away. I'd wake up to find my cabin door standing open, letting in the cold mountain air. My rifle would be moved from where I'd left it. My hunting knife would be gone from its sheath, only to turn up later stuck in my kitchen table with something carved into the wood beneath it. Cherokee symbols, the same ones I'd seen on the oak tree. I drove into town to see Mary Crowfeather, the oldest Cherokee woman I knew. She ran a small store selling traditional crafts and was about the closest thing to a tribal elder we had in the area. "Mrs. Crowfeather," I said, showing her a rubbing I'd made of the symbols, "can you tell me what these mean?" She looked at the paper and her face went pale. Her hands started shaking just like Buck's had. "Where did you see these?" she asked. "Carved in trees, left at hunting camps. Someone or something is marking the woods with them." Mary set the paper down carefully, like it might catch fire. "These are old signs, older than my grandmother's grandmother. They tell the story of Kanati." "The hunter from your legends?" "Not legend," she said firmly. "History. Kanati was a real man, the greatest hunter our people ever knew. But he became something more when he saw what the white hunters were doing to the land, killing everything they could find just for sport." She pointed to one of the symbols. "This one means judgment. This one means balance." And this one, she touched the paper and pulled her finger back like she'd been burned. This one means punishment. What happened to Kanati? Mary looked out the window toward Grandfather Mountain. He made a bargain with the spirits of all the animals that had been killed without need. They gave him the power to hunt the hunters, to judge who killed for survival and who killed for pleasure. But the power changed him, made him something between man and spirit. Is he still out there? During the harvest moon, when the ancient hunting season begins, Kanati walks the sacred grounds. He tests every hunter he finds, judges their heart and their purpose. Mary's eyes met mine. Those who hunt with respect, who take only what they need and honor what they kill, he leaves alone. But those who hunt for sport, who kill for the joy of killing. She didn't need to finish. I thought about Jerry Walsh and the 3 hunters from Virginia. I thought about all the deer I'd shot over the years, all the bears and wild turkeys. How many had I killed because I needed food, and how many because I enjoyed the hunt? That night, I sat in my cabin cleaning my rifle and thinking about my wife and son. Sarah had always worried about my hunting, said it changed me somehow, said I came back from the woods different, harder. Maybe she'd been right. Around midnight, I heard footsteps on my porch. They were slow and deliberate, circling the cabin like whatever was out there was studying the place. I grabbed my rifle and moved to the window, but all I could see was moonlight and shadows. The footsteps stopped at my front door. 3 knocks, perfectly spaced. Then silence. I waited, rifle ready, but nothing else happened. After an hour, I finally got brave enough to check outside. On my porch, arranged in a neat line, were 3 things: Jerry Walsh's hunting knife, a bone arrowhead that looked ancient, and a photograph I hadn't seen in years. The photograph showed me in Korea, posing with my sniper rifle over a row of enemy soldiers I'd killed. I was smiling in the picture, proud of my marksmanship. I'd forgotten about that smile, forgotten how good killing had felt back then. Written on the back of the photo in silver ink were Cherokee symbols. I didn't need Mary Crow Feather to translate these ones. I could feel what they meant in my bones. We are the same, you and I. We both know the joy of the hunt. But do you hunt for need or pleasure? Tomorrow night, when the moon is full, we will find out. I spent the next day preparing like I was going back to war. Cleaned and loaded every weapon I owned, set up defensive positions around my cabin, radioed my location to the sheriff's department. If something wanted to hunt me, I'd be ready. But as the sun went down and the harvest moon rose full and bright above Grandfather Mountain, I realized I'd made a terrible mistake. Kanati wasn't coming to my cabin. He was leading me into the woods. Every instinct I had, every bit of training from Korea and 16 years of ranger work was telling me to go deeper into the forest. Something was drawing me out there, something stronger than fear or common sense. I grabbed my rifle and stepped into the night, following a path I'd never seen before but somehow knew by heart. The moonlight was so bright it cast sharp shadows, and the air hummed with an energy that made my skin crawl. Behind me, my cabin door swung shut with a sound like a coffin closing. Ahead of me, something silver moved between the trees, leading me toward a confrontation that had been 16 years in the making. The path led me to a clearing I'd never seen before, though I'd walked these mountains for 16 years. It was perfectly round, ringed by ancient oak trees that seemed to glow silver in the moonlight. In the center was a circle of standing stones, worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. Cherokee sacred ground. And standing in the middle of that stone circle was Kanati. He was even taller than I'd thought, maybe 8.5 feet, with silver hair that moved like water and skin that seemed to be made of moonlight itself. His eyes were the color of winter stars, cold and bright and ancient. In his hands was a bow that looked like it had been carved from the night sky. "Jonathan Bloodworth," he said, and his voice was the wind through autumn leaves. "You have hunted in my woods for many years." I kept my rifle ready but didn't aim it. Something told me bullets wouldn't matter much here. "I've been a ranger, protecting these woods." "Protecting?" Kanati tilted his head like a curious animal. "Or hunting. I have watched you. Watch the joy in your eyes when you take a life. You are like me in that way. I hunt for food, for survival. Do you? He gestured to the trees around us, and suddenly, they were filled with ghostly images. Every animal I'd ever killed, every hunt I'd ever been on. Show me, hunter. Show me which of these deaths were from need and which were from the pleasure of killing. The images played out around us like movies. I saw myself as a young man tracking my first deer and feeling that rush when my shot brought it down. I saw the pride in my father's eyes, the way the other hunters respected my skill. I saw Korea, where killing became a job, and then something more. And I saw my family. Sarah appeared among the ghostly images, holding little Tommy's hand. They looked exactly like they had the day I left for my last deployment. Her in her blue dress, him with that gap-toothed smile. You taught them to fear the woods, Kanati said. Told them bears and wolves were dangerous, that nature was something to fight against instead of live with. I was trying to protect them. By making them afraid. By teaching them that death comes from the wild places. The moon hunter's voice was sad now, almost gentle. When the rabid bear found them, they ran in panic instead of standing still. They fought instead of showing respect. Fear killed them, Jonathan Bloodworth. Fear that you taught them. The truth hit me like a physical blow. I'd spent so many years blaming myself for not being there to protect them, but I'd never realized that my own teachings had made them vulnerable. The bear was sick, I whispered. Yes, sick and confused and in pain. It would have left them alone if they had shown it respect, acknowledged its power without challenge. But you had taught them that wild things were enemies to be defeated. Around us, the ghostly images shifted to show what really happened that day. Sarah and Tommy encountering the bear on their walk, Tommy throwing rocks like I'd taught him to scare off dangerous animals, Sarah screaming and running like I'd told her to do if she ever met a predator. All the wrong responses, all my teachings. You hunt now to punish nature for their deaths, Kanati said. Each kill is revenge against the wildness that took them. But nature was not their enemy, Hunter. You were. I fell to my knees in that circle of stones, my rifle forgotten. The weight of 16 years of guilt and anger and misplaced blame crushed down on me like a mountain. What do you want from me? I asked. I want you to hunt. But one more time, Kanati said. There is a spirit bear in these woods, the same one that killed your family. It has been twisted by pain and madness, corrupted by the violence it committed. It preys on the innocent now, and it must be stopped. He handed me something, a bow made of silver wood with arrows that gleamed like moonbeams. But you must hunt it the old way, with respect and ceremony. You must acknowledge its power, honor its spirit, and take its life only to restore balance. Can you do this, Hunter? Can you kill without hatred? I looked at the bow, then at the ghostly images of my family still flickering among the trees. If I succeed, then you will understand what you should have learned long ago. That death is part of life, that hunting can be sacred, and that taking a life without hatred or pleasure is the greatest skill any hunter can possess. And if I fail? Kanati's silver eyes seemed to look right through me. Then you will join the bear in its madness, and I will have to hunt you both. I took the bow. It felt warm in my hands, alive somehow. Where do I find this bear? It finds you, Kanati said, and stepped backward into the shadows between the trees. Remember, Jonathan Bloodworth, hunt with respect, kill with sorrow, and honor the spirit of what you must destroy. This is the test that will determine whether you live or die. The clearing began to fade around me, the stone circle sinking into the earth like it had never existed. Soon I was standing alone in the regular forest, holding a bow that seemed to be made of captured starlight. From somewhere in the darkness came a sound I recognized. The huffing grunt of a large bear, but wrong somehow, twisted with madness and pain. The final hunt had begun. The bear found me just before dawn. I heard it coming through the underbrush, crashing and snuffling, making more noise than any healthy bear should. When it stepped into the small clearing where I waited, I saw why. It was massive, easily 800 pounds, with fur that had once been brown but was now stained black with old blood. Its eyes were yellow and wild, foam dripping from its jaws. But worst of all were the wounds, deep gashes across its face and shoulders that should have healed years ago but remained fresh and bleeding. The spiritual corruption Kanati had spoken of. This bear was trapped in the moment it had killed my family, forced to relive that violence over and over until it drove the animal insane. It saw me and reared up on its hind legs, roaring with a sound that held all the pain and confusion of a creature that couldn't understand what it had become. I raised the silver bow, feeling its power flow through my arms. The arrow knocked itself, glowing with soft moonlight. But as I drew back the string, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Sorrow for what I was about to kill. "I'm sorry," I whispered to the bear. "I'm sorry for what happened to you. I'm sorry we both got lost in that moment." The bear charged, moving faster than anything that big had a right to. But I didn't feel the familiar rush of adrenaline, the joy of the hunt that had driven me for so many years. Instead, I felt sadness and respect and the weight of necessary action. The arrow flew straight and true, piercing the bear's heart. But instead of blood, silver light poured from the wound. The animal stumbled, looked at me with eyes that suddenly seemed clear and grateful, then collapsed to the forest floor. As I watched, the bear's body began to change. The wounds healed, the madness left its eyes, and for a moment, I saw it as it had been before. A magnificent creature just trying to survive in a world that had gone wrong around it. Then it faded away like morning mist, finally free from the cycle of violence that had trapped us both. "Well done, Hunter." I turned to find Kanati standing behind me, but he looked different now. More solid, more human. His silver eyes held approval and something that might have been pride. "The bear is at peace," he said. "And so, I think, are you." He was right. For the first time since I'd lost my family, I felt the terrible knot of anger and guilt in my chest begin to loosen. "What happens now?" "Now you choose," Kanati said. "You can return to your old life, continue being a ranger with the knowledge you've gained, or you can stay here, help me maintain the balance between those who would hunt and those who should be protected." I thought about my empty cabin, my solitary life, the endless cycle of patrolling and paperwork that had filled my days for 16 years. What would staying here mean? You would become like me, not fully human, not fully spirit, but something in between. You would walk these mountains during the hunting seasons, testing those who come here to kill, teaching them the difference between hunting and murder. It should have been a hard choice. But as I stood there in the dawn light, feeling more at peace than I had in years, I knew what my answer would be. "I accept." Kanati smiled, the first time I'd seen any warmth in his ancient features. "Then drink this," he said, offering me a cup made from what looked like polished bone. Inside was liquid that gleamed like liquid moonlight. I drank it all. It tasted like winter air and pine sap, and the moment before snow falls. The change came slowly. I felt my vision sharpen until I could see individual leaves on trees a mile away. My hearing became so acute I could distinguish between the heartbeats of different animals. And something else. A sense of the forest itself, of every creature that moved within it, every hunter that entered with good intentions or bad. "Welcome to the sacred hunt, Jonathan Bloodworth," Kanati said. "You are the Harvest Moon huntsman now." That was 41 years ago. I still walk these mountains during hunting season, still test those who come here to kill. Most hunters I leave alone. They're good people who respect the animals they take and understand that death is part of life. But sometime, as I find others, men who hunt for the thrill of killing, who take more than they need and waste what they don't want. Those hunters have learned to fear the sight of silver eyes watching them from the darkness. The forest is different now than it was in 1974. There are more people, more houses, more roads cutting through the wilderness. But the old sacred places remain, and the ancient contract between hunter and hunted still holds. Mary Crowfeather's granddaughter runs the craft shop in town now. Sometimes she leaves offerings at the edge of the woods, tobacco and sage and cornmeal. She knows I'm out here, knows what I've become. The Cherokee remember their stories, pass them down from one generation to the next. And every October, when the harvest moon rises full and bright above Grandfather Mountain, I remember my family. Not with guilt anymore, but with love and the knowledge that their deaths taught me something important about the balance between life and death, between taking and giving, between fear and respect. I am the guardian of that balance now, and I will be until the mountains themselves crumble into dust. The hunt continues. My name is Marcus Ironbridge, and I've been inspecting bridges for 15 years. Never thought I'd be the kind of man to believe in monsters, but after what happened at New River Gorge in the summer of '76, well, some things change a man's mind real quick. I was 42 that August, working out of Hawks Nest State Park in West Virginia. Been divorced 3 years by then, and my daughter Sarah barely spoke to me. Can't say I blamed her much. When you spend your life crawling around bridge supports and checking stress points, you don't leave much time for family dinners. The job suited me, though. There's something honest about steel and concrete. They don't lie to you. When a beam's about to fail, it shows you cracks. When a foundation's shifting, you can measure it. Everything has a reason, a cause you can point to and fix. My specialty was bridge safety, which some folks found funny considering what happened to my father. He died when I was 12, in a bridge collapse down in Kentucky. The newspapers called it a structural failure due to poor maintenance. Clean and simple, no mystery there. That's why I became an engineer first, then a ranger. Wanted to make sure no other kid lost their daddy to a bridge that should have been condemned. I was good at my job, too. Real good. In 15 years, I'd never missed a critical flaw. The New River Gorge Bridge was supposed to be my masterpiece inspection. They were building the longest single-arch steel bridge in the world, 3,030 feet long, stretching 876 feet above the river. When finished, it would carry folks right over one of the most beautiful valleys in West Virginia. Construction started in 1974, but by August '76, they were way behind schedule. Too many accidents, the foreman told me. Workers getting hurt in ways that didn't make much sense. Tools going missing. Equipment breaking down for no good reason. Just bad luck, Tom Bradley, the site supervisor, said when I arrived for my monthly inspection. He was a big man with hands like tree stumps, been building bridges for 25 years. But I could see worry lines around his eyes that hadn't been there on my last visit. How bad? I asked, pulling on my hard hat. Lost 12 men since we started. Jimmy Hastings was the worst. Tom's voice dropped low. Found him welded inside a support beam yesterday morning. Still alive when we cut him out, but he shook his head. Couldn't explain how he got in there. Steel was solid all around him. I'd seen construction accidents before, plenty of them, but welding a man inside a beam, that wasn't an accident. That was something else entirely. As we walked toward the bridge, I noticed how quiet the work site was. Usually, construction crews are loud, shouting over machinery, radios playing, metal clanging against metal. But here, the workers moved like they were in church. Whispers instead of yells, quick glances over their shoulders. The men seemed spooked, I said. Tom nodded. Started about 6 months ago. They claim tools move by themselves. Say they hear voices echoing up from the gorge at night, but there's nobody down there. He stopped walking and looked at me straight on. Marcus, I've been doing this job longer than most. Seen men die in every way you can imagine. But this feels different. I was about to tell him that feelings don't matter in engineering when I saw something that made my stomach drop. The main support cable, thick as my waist and strong enough to hold up a freight train, was twisted into the shape of a noose. Tom, I said, my voice coming out funny. When did that happen? He followed my gaze and went pale. That wasn't like that yesterday. I swear on my mother's grave, that cable was straight yesterday. I pulled out my notebook and started writing, but my hand was shaking. In 15 years of bridge inspection, I'd never seen steel cable twist itself into knots. Steel doesn't move on its own. It follows the laws of physics. But looking up at that noose swaying in the August breeze, I started to wonder if maybe physics wasn't the only law at work in New River Gorge. The next morning, I came back to the site early before the crew arrived. Wanted to examine that cable in good light, maybe figure out how someone could have twisted it without heavy equipment. But when I got there, the cable was straight again. Not just straight, perfect, like it had never been touched. I stood there for 10 minutes, staring up at that cable and questioning my own eyes. Tom had seen it too, though. We'd both seen the same impossible thing. "Mr. Ironbridge?" I turned to find an old Cherokee man standing behind me. He was thin and weathered, with long gray hair and the kind of eyes that seemed to see more than they should. I hadn't heard him approach, which was strange given all the gravel and loose metal scattered around the site. "I'm Thomas Sequoia," he said. "I came to warn you about this place." "Warn me about what?" "This crossing has been sacred to my people for 1,000 years. We called it Envi Duyuktve, the place where spirits collect their due." He looked up at the half-built bridge stretching across the gorge. "Your builders are disturbing something that should be left alone." I'd heard this kind of talk before on other construction sites. Local folks getting upset about development, using old stories to try and stop progress. Usually meant they wanted money to go away. "Mr. Sequoia, I appreciate your concern, but this bridge is going to help a lot of people. Cut travel time by hours, bring jobs to the area." The old man's expression didn't change. "The bridge warden doesn't care about your jobs or your travel time. It only cares about the toll." "Bridge warden?" "Every crossing has a price. The spirits that guard these sacred places, they demand payment from those who would pass over. Yo, your father knew this." My blood went cold. "What did you say about my father?" "John Ironbridge died at Tug Fork Bridge in Kentucky, 1946. He was investigating the same kind of accidents you're seeing here. Same pattern of deaths, same warnings ignored." Thomas Sequoia stepped closer, and I could smell something like old smoke and pine needles on him. "He tried to bargain with the bridge warden, offered himself as permanent toll to protect others, but he was too late. I wanted to call him a liar, tell him to get off the construction site, but something in his voice made me listen instead. "How do you know about my father?" "Because the bridge warden remembers every soul it claims, and it's been waiting for you, Marcus. Waiting for John Ironbridge's son to come back and finish what his father started." Before I could ask what he meant, the sound of diesel engines filled the air. The work crew was arriving for the day shift. When I turned back to Thomas Sequoia, he was gone. Just vanished, like smoke in the wind. I spent the morning going over every inch of the main support cables, looking for signs of tampering. Found stress fractures that shouldn't have been possible. Hairline cracks that zigzagged through solid steel like lightning bolts. The metal around them was discolored, almost like it had been burned from the inside. "Hey, Mr. Ironbridge!" Jimmy Hastings was walking toward me, hard hat in his hand. This was the man Tom said had been welded inside a support beam. He looked normal enough, maybe a little pale, but otherwise fine. "Jimmy, right? Tom told me you had an accident yesterday." His face went strange. "Accident. Yeah, that's what we're calling it." He glanced around to make sure nobody was listening, then moved closer. "Can I tell you something? Off the record?" I nodded. I remember being inside that beam. I remember how I got there. Jimmy's voice died, dropped to a whisper. "I was working on the North Tower, welding joints like usual. Then I heard this voice calling my name from inside the steel. Not from outside, from inside, like someone was trapped in the metal itself." He paused, wiping sweat from his forehead, even though the morning was cool. "The voice sounded like my brother Danny. He died in Vietnam 2 years ago. But I swear it was him, calling for help. So I touched the steel where the voice was coming from, and the metal just opened up like water. Pulled me right inside. Jimmy, you were probably unconscious. Hit your head. Had a dream. No, sir. I was awake the whole time. Inside that beam, it wasn't dark. There were other people in there with me. Other workers who'd died on construction jobs. They were all talking at once, telling me about the bridge warden. Said it collects souls like toll money, keeps them trapped in whatever structure they died building. Jimmy put his hard hat back on, hands shaking slightly. They told me something else, Mr. Ironbridge. Said your father's in there too. In every bridge that thing has claimed, and they're all waiting for you to set them free. He walked away before I could respond, leaving me standing there with a head full of questions and no good answers. That afternoon, I found the first body. Her name was Lisa Chen, and she'd been the site's safety coordinator for 8 months. I found her hanging from the main support cable, the same one that had been twisted into a noose the day before. But Lisa wasn't just hanging there. She was somehow woven into the cable itself, like her body had been braided together with the steel strands. The coroner said she'd been dead for hours, but 3 different workers swore they'd seen her walking around the site just minutes before I found her. Tom Bradley went white as paper when he saw the body. This isn't natural, Marcus. This is something else. I wanted to disagree, but looking at Lisa's body tangled up in that cable like some kind of horrible art project, I couldn't find a rational explanation. You don't want to accidentally get braided into steel cable. Someone or something had put her there on purpose. We shut down the site for 2 days while the police investigated. They couldn't explain it either. The official report listed it as an industrial accident with unusual circumstances. But I could see the doubt in the detective's eyes. He knew this was wrong, same as the rest of us. When work resumed, I noticed the bridge had changed. Not in any way I could measure or document. The dimensions were the same. The steel was still steel. The concrete was still concrete. But something about the structure felt different. Hungry, maybe. Like it was waiting for something. The workers felt it too. Half the crew quit after Lisa's death, and the ones who stayed moved like they were walking through a graveyard. They worked in groups, nobody going anywhere alone. They started leaving offerings, sandwiches, cigarettes, small tools, at the base of the main towers. "What's that about?" I asked Tom. "Old country superstition. Feed the spirits so they don't feed on you." He looked embarrassed. "I know it sounds crazy, but after what happened to Lisa..." That night, I stayed late to do some testing on the steel samples I'd collected. The construction trailer was quiet except for the hum of my portable lab equipment and the distant sound of the river far below. Around midnight, I heard footsteps on the trailer's metal steps. "Tom, that you?" I called out. No answer, but the footsteps continued. Slow, heavy steps that made the whole trailer shake. Then the door opened, and Lisa Chen walked in. She looked exactly like she had the day before she died, except her safety coordinator badge was now made of twisted steel cable, and her eyes reflected light like polished metal. "Hello, Marcus," she said, and her voice sounded like wind blowing through bridge girders. "The bridge warden wants to meet you." I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. Just sat there staring at a dead woman who was somehow standing in my trailer talking to me like nothing had happened. "Your father left. Something unfinished," Lisa continued. "A bargain that was never completed. The bridge warden has been patient, but patience has limits." "You're not Lisa," I managed to whisper. "No, Lisa is part of the bridge now. Part of all of us who serve the warden." She stepped closer, and I could see that her feet weren't quite touching the floor. "Every bridge needs a guardian, Marcus. Every crossing needs a toll collector. Your father understood this. My father died in an accident." Lisa, or whatever was wearing Lisa's face, smiled. John Ironbridge knew the old agreements, knew that sacred places demand sacred prices. He tried to negotiate, tried to offer himself as permanent payment to protect other bridges. But he waited too long, and the warden grew impatient. The lights in the trailer began to flicker, and I could hear metal creaking outside. like the bridge was shifting in ways it shouldn't. The Kentucky bridge collapse wasn't an accident, Marcus. It was a demonstration. The warden showing your father what happens to those who break their promises. Lisa's voice was getting deeper, more hollow. Now, the New River Gorge Bridge is nearly complete, and the toll must be paid. 12 souls weren't enough. The warden wants more. What does it want from me? Finish what your father started. Take his place as the bridge's guardian. Collect the tolls from those who would cross sacred ground without permission. Lisa began to fade, becoming translucent like morning mist. Or watch everyone you care about become part of the structure instead. She was gone, leaving only the smell of rusted metal and the sound of my own terrified breathing. I ran outside to look at the bridge, and what I saw made my knees weak. The steel beams were moving, reshaping themselves in the moonlight. The bridge was building itself, adding sections that weren't in the original blueprints. Impasses. Blue architecture that hurt to look at directly. And hanging from every support cable, swaying in the night breeze, were the bodies of everyone who had died on the construction site. All 12 workers, including Lisa, suspended in the air like some kind of grotesque mobile. But they weren't really dead. Their eyes followed me as I stumbled back toward the trailer. Their mouths moved, whispering words I couldn't quite hear but somehow understood. They were calling my name, all of them, calling me to join them in their eternal watch over the crossing. I drove home that night, but I could feel the bridge pulling at me even from miles away, like a fishhook buried deep in my chest, connected to the New River Gorge by an invisible line. The bridge warden had marked me, and I was running out of time to decide what I was going to do about it. I didn't sleep for 3 days. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see that impossible bridge rebuilding itself, those dead workers swaying from the cables like wind chimes made of human bones. On the 4th day, my daughter Sarah showed up at my apartment. "Dad, you look terrible," she said, pushing past me into the living room. At 19, she had her mother's stubborn streak and my own tendency to jump into dangerous situations without thinking. "You shouldn't be here, Sarah. Mom called. Said you hadn't been answering your phone, missed your last 2 child support payments." She sat down on my couch and fixed me with that steady stare she'd inherited from both sides of the family. "What's going on?" I wanted to tell her about the bridge warden, about Lisa Chen walking into my trailer 3 nights after her death, about the steel cables that twisted themselves into nooses. But how do you explain something like that to someone you love? How do you tell your daughter that monsters are real? "Work's been stressful," I said instead. "Dad, I'm not 12 anymore. I can tell when you're lying." Sarah leaned forward. "Does this have something to do with Grandpa John?" My heart stopped. "What do you know about your grandfather?" "I've been researching our family history for a college project. Found some old newspaper articles about the bridge collapse in Kentucky, the one that killed him." Sarah pulled out a folder from her purse. "Dad, there's stuff in here you need to see." She spread newspaper clippings across my coffee table. Headlines from 1946. "Bridge collapse kills local engineer." "Mysterious circumstances surround Tug Fork disaster." "Worker claims supernatural activity before accident." But it was the last article that made my hands shake. A small piece buried on page 6 of the Charleston Gazette, dated 2 days before the collapse. "Engineer claims bridge haunted, warns of ancient curse." The article quoted my father directly. "Something lives in these old crossing places, something that demands payment from anyone who would disturb the sacred balance. I've seen things that can't be explained by engineering or physics. If I don't find a way to appease this entity, more people will die." "Dad," Sarah said softly, "what was Grandpa John talking about?" Before I could answer, my phone rang. Tom Bradley's name on the caller ID. "Marcus, thank God. You need to get down here right now." "What's wrong?" "It's your daughter. Something's got your daughter." The phone went dead in my hand. I looked at Sarah sitting right there on my couch and felt the world tilt sideways. "Sarah, we need to leave. Right now." "Dad, what's now?" We drove to the construction site in silence, my mind racing through impossible possibilities. If Sarah was here with me, who was Tom talking about? But deep down, I already knew. The bridge warden was playing games, showing me what it could do to the people I cared about. The construction site was chaos. Emergency vehicles everywhere, workers standing around looking lost and scared. Tom Bradley ran up to my truck as soon as we parked. Marcus, she just appeared about an hour ago. Said she was looking for you, then walked straight into the bridge structure. We tried to stop her, but she just disappeared into the steel. Who? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Your daughter. Young woman, looked just like you. Said her name was Sarah Ironbridge. I looked at the real Sarah standing next to me and saw my own confusion reflected in her face. Dad, I don't understand. I've been with you all day. The bridge warden, I whispered. It's using your image to force my hand. The what? But I was already running toward the bridge, Tom and Sarah chasing after me. As we got closer, I could see her, or the thing that looked like her, standing in the center of the main span. She waved at me, smiling like this was all some kind of game. Daddy, the fake Sarah called out. Come play with us. Around her, the dead construction workers were materializing, stepping out of the steel beams like they were walking through doorways. Lisa Chen was there, and Jimmy Hastings, and all the others. They formed a circle around the Sarah thing, holding hands like children playing a game. Marcus Ironbridge, a new voice boomed from the bridge itself. The steel sang with it, harmonizing like a massive organ made of metal and concrete. You have kept me waiting long enough. The bridge warden stepped out of the main support tower. 15 feet tall, it was a patchwork creature made from pieces of every bridge it had claimed. Railroad spikes for teeth, suspension cables for hair, rusted steel plates for skin. Its eyes were the headlights of cars that had crashed through broken bridges, still burning with ghostly fire. Your father promised me a guardian for this crossing, the warden said, its voice making the entire bridge vibrate. Someone to collect the tolls from those who would pass over sacred ground. He failed to keep his pito, Romis. Let my daughter go. She's not part of this. The warden laughed, a sound like metal tearing apart. This is not your daughter, Marcus Ironbridge. This is merely her shadow, her possibility, but I could make it real. I could take her from you as easily as I took your father. The real Sarah grabbed my arm. Dad, what is that thing? Every bridge needs a guardian, the warden continued. Every crossing needs a collector of tolls. Your father understood this, but he was too weak to pay the price. Will you be stronger? What do you want? Join me willingly, and I will spare those who use this bridge. Refuse, and I will claim every soul that dares cross my domain. Your choice, son of John. I looked at Sarah, my real daughter, terrified but trying to be brave. Then I looked at the fake Sarah standing in the bridge's center, surrounded by the dead. Finally, I looked at the bridge warden itself, ancient and hungry and patient. My father had tried to make this bargain and failed, but maybe I could succeed where he hadn't. I'll take his place, I said. I'll be your bridge guardian. But you have to promise, no more killing innocent people. No more claiming souls who don't deserve it. The warden smiled with its railroad spiked teeth. Acceptable. But first, you must prove your commitment. Destroy the bridge that connects you to the living world, and join us in the world between worlds. It gestured toward the main support cables, the ones that held the entire span together. If I severed those, the whole bridge would collapse. Dad, no! Sarah grabbed my arm tighter. There has to be another way. But I could see the truth in the warden's burning headlight eyes. This was the only way to end the cycle, the only way to protect everyone else. I pulled out the demolition charges I'd been carrying in my truck, standard equipment for bridge inspectors who might need to bring down unstable structures in emergencies. Sarah, get everyone back, way back. Dad, do it! I kissed her forehead, tasting tears. I love you, honey. Tell your mother I'm sorry. I was never a better husband or father. I ran toward the bridge's center, toward the fake Sarah and the circle of dead workers. The bridge warden watched me approach, its expression unreadable. "You would destroy your own work?" it asked. "To save my daughter's world?" "Yes." I placed the charges on the main support cables, my hands steady despite everything. The fake Sarah walked over to me, looking so much like my real daughter. It hurt. "You don't have to do this, Daddy. We could be together forever." "You're not her," I said, setting the timer. "You're just something wearing her face." The charges exploded with a sound like thunder, and the New River Gorge Bridge began to fall. I should have died in that collapse. 500 tons of steel and concrete plummeting 876 feet into the river below. Nobody survives something like that. But I didn't die. Not exactly. When the dust settled and the rescue crews pulled my broken body from the wreckage, I was still breathing. Barely. They flew me to the hospital in Charleston, told Sarah I might not make it through the night. But I did make it. And when I woke up 3 days later, I understood what had really happened. The bridge warden had kept its bargain, just not in the way I'd expected. I was still human, still alive. But I was also something else now. Connected to every bridge that crosses sacred ground, able to sense when the old agreements are being broken, when ancient prices need to be paid. The difference is, I don't collect souls for the bridge warden anymore. I protect them from it. Sarah visits me every few months. I live in a cabin near the gorge now, officially retired on disability. She thinks the accident left me with some brain damage, explains why I sometimes talk about things that don't make sense. I let her believe that. It's easier than the truth. They rebuilt the New River Gorge Bridge, finished it, 2 years later. It's beautiful, exactly what it was meant to be. A gateway between worlds that lets people travel safely across ancient sacred ground. No construction workers died during the rebuilding. No accidents, no mysterious disappearances, no tools twisted into impossible shapes. Because now the bridge has a guardian who actually protects the living instead of preying on them. Late at night, when the fog rolls up from the river and the moonlight turns the steel silver, I walk out to the bridge and check on things. Make sure the balance is maintained, that the old spirits are appeased, that travelers cross safely from one side to the other. Sometimes I see my father there, standing at the center span where the fake Sarah used to wave. He looks proud, I think, like maybe I finished what he started after all. The bridge warden is still there too, woven into the steel and concrete like a sleeping giant. But it's quiet now, patient. It knows I'm watching, knows the tolls are being paid in different currency these days. Respect instead of blood, understanding instead of fear. Yesterday, Sarah brought her new boyfriend to meet me. Nice young man, engineering student like I used to be. They're planning to drive across the bridge on their way to Virginia Beach for vacation. "Be careful out there," I told them as they were leaving. "Pay attention to the road signs. Respect the places you're traveling through." Sarah laughed and hugged me goodbye. "We will, Dad. Love you." "Love you too, honey." After they drove away, I walked out to my usual spot, overlooking the gorge. The bridge stretched across the valley like a steel rainbow, carrying traffic safely from one world to another. Cars and trucks crossing over sacred ground, their drivers never knowing what ancient agreements keep them safe. That's fine. Some knowledge is too heavy for ordinary folks to carry, but someone has to remember. Someone has to stand watch. Someone has to make sure the tolls get paid, one way or another. My name is Marcus Ironbridge, and I've been a bridge guardian for 49 years now. It's not the job I planned to have, but it's the job I chose. And late at night, when the fog rolls in and the bridge sings with the voices of all who've crossed before, I know my father would be proud of the man I became. Some bridges are just meant to be protected, no matter what it costs. My name is David Blacklung, and I never thought I'd go back underground again. For 18 years, I worked these mountains as a forest ranger, clean air, open sky, trees instead of tunnel walls. But before that, I spent my whole life in the coal mines, just like my daddy and his daddy before him. The black dust got in my lungs, made me cough up blood, and nearly killed me. That's why I left the mines in 1955 and never looked back. Until today. I'm standing at the mouth of Harlan Deep Mine number 7, holding my old mining helmet in my hands. The metal feels cold, even in the September heat. This mine's been closed for 11 years now, ever since the big explosion in 1962 that killed 23 good men. Men I knew, men I worked beside. My supervisor, Jim Hartley, kicks at a rusty piece of mining equipment. Bureau of Mines wants this whole place sealed up for good, he says. Too dangerous to leave open. Kids keep trying to explore it. I nod, but my chest feels tight. Not from the black lung this time, from fear. You sure you're the right man for this job, David? Jim asks. I know you got history here. History. That's one way to put it. I lost my Uncle Pete in a mine cave-in when I was 12. My cousins Bobby and Frank died in a gas explosion at mine number 4. Half the men I grew up with are dead or dying from the black lung. The other half drink too much to forget. I'm fine, I lie. Just need to do one last survey, check for gas leaks and structural damage. Then we seal her up forever. Jim hands me the paperwork. Radio every hour. If something goes wrong down there, we'll get you out. I look at the dark hole in the mountainside. The old wooden supports around the entrance are rotting. Weeds grow through cracks in the concrete. A rusty sign hangs crooked. Danger, no entry. Harlan, Deep Mine, number 7. But it's not the danger that bothers me. It's the silence. When I work, to hear this place was never quiet. Always the sound of machines, men calling to each other, coal cars rolling on tracks. Now there's nothing. Just the wind whistling through the entrance like the mountain is breathing. I put on my helmet and check my equipment. Gas detector, breathing mask, emergency radio, flashlight. The beam cuts through the darkness ahead, but it doesn't go far. The tunnel swallows light like it's hungry. 17 years above ground, I mutter to myself. Thought I was done with mine spirits. That's what we called the strange things that happened underground. Sounds with no source. Lights that moved on their own. The feeling that something was watching you in the dark. Most miners said it was just bad air playing tricks on your mind. I used to believe that. I start walking into the mine. My footsteps echo off the rock walls. The air smells like sulfur and old decay. Water drips somewhere in the darkness. Each step takes me deeper into the belly of the mountain. The main tunnel splits into 3 directions. I take the center path, the one that leads to the deepest parts of the mine. My flashlight beam shows the old coal cars still sitting on their tracks, covered in dust and rust. Pickaxes lean against the walls where men left them 11 years ago. Then I see something that makes me stop. Fresh footprints in the coal dust. Human footprints, leading deeper into the mine. I kneel down and touch one with my finger. The dust is dry, but the print is clear. Someone's been here recently. Today, maybe. Hello? I call out. My voice bounces off the walls and comes back empty. Anyone down here? Nothing. I follow the footprints for 50 yards. They lead to a side tunnel I remember well. That's where we kept the canaries. Every mine had them. Little yellow birds in metal cages. They were more sensitive to bad air than we were. If the canary stopped singing, you knew to get out fast. If the canary died, you ran. I shine my light into the side tunnel. The cages are still there, dozens of them, hanging from hooks driven into the rock ceiling. But that's not what makes my blood run cold. The canaries are still in the cages, dead for 11 years, but perfectly preserved. Their little yellow bodies sit on their perches like they just fell asleep. Not a speck of decay on them. And they're all arranged the same way. Every single bird is facing deeper into the mine, like they're pointing towards something. I pull out my radio. Jim, this is David. Something's not right down here. Static. Then, David, you're breaking up. Say again? I said something's not right. There are... The radio goes dead. Just static, then silence. I try again. Nothing. A sound echoes from deeper in the mine. Tap, 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 tap. The sound of a pickaxe hitting rock. But that's impossible. This mine's been closed for 11 years. The tapping stops when I start moving toward it. I walk deeper into the mine, past old support beams and abandoned equipment. My footsteps echo in the darkness. The air gets thicker, harder to breathe. I put on my breathing mask, but it doesn't help much. The tunnel slopes downward. I remember this part. We called it the drop because it went down fast toward the deepest coal seams. The walls here are different. Black coal mixed with gray rock. Water seeps through cracks and pools on the floor. My gas detector starts clicking. Not the steady beep that means danger, but random clicks like it can't make up its mind. I tap it with my finger. The needle jumps all over the place. "Come on," I whisper. "Don't fail me now." More footprints in the dust. But these look different, older, like they were made by mining boots from years ago. The tunnel opens into a wide chamber. This is where we used to load the coal cars. Big iron machinery still sits here, covered in rust. Rails disappear into 3 different tunnels, and then I see him. A man in mining clothes kneeling next to one of the old coal cars. He is wearing the blue work shirt and hard hat that all Harlan deep miners wore. His back is to me. "Hey," I call out. "You shouldn't be down here. This mine's closed." The man doesn't move. I walk closer, my flashlight beam on his back. "Sir, are you all right?" Still nothing. I reach out to touch his shoulder. My hand goes right through him. The man turns around slowly. His face is pale as chalk. His eyes, black holes in his skull. Coal dust covers his clothes, but underneath I can see something terrible. His chest is caved in, crushed. Dark stains spread across his shirt. He opens his mouth and coal dust pours out instead of words. I stumble backward, my heart hammering. The man reaches toward me with hands that end in broken, bloody fingers. Then he's gone, just like that. Empty air where he was standing. I'm breathing so hard the mask fogs up. My hands shake as I wipe it clean. "Get it together, David," I tell myself. "Just bad air. You know how it is down here." But I know it's not bad air. The tapping starts again. Tap, tap, tap. This time it comes from the left tunnel, the one that leads to the main coal seam where the explosion happened. I don't want to go that way. Every part of me says to turn around, go back to the surface. Tell Jim the mine's too dangerous to survey. Let someone else seal it up. But I can't. Those 23 men who died here deserve better than that. I start down the left tunnel. The walls get closer together. The ceiling drops low enough that I have to duck my head. Water runs in streams along the floor. My flashlight shows old wooden support beams, some cracked, some missing entirely. The footprints are everywhere now, dozens of them, all heading in the same direction I'm going. Then I hear voices, faint at first, like they're coming from far away. Men talking, laughing, calling out to each other, the sounds miners make when they're working. But as I get closer, I can make out words. "Bobby, bring them spikes over here. Watch your head on that beam. Charlie's got his lunch pail again. Smells like sardines." I know those voices. I worked with those men for 15 years, but they've been dead for 11 years. The tunnel opens into the main work area. This is where it happened. Where 23 men died when methane gas caught fire and the whole place went up like a bomb. And they're all still here. Ghostly figures move through the chamber like they're still working. Some swing pickaxes at the coal seam. Others load coal into cars that haven't moved in over a decade. They walk through each other, through the machinery, through the walls themselves. They look exactly like they did the day they died. Same clothes, same faces, same movements. But they're all pale and see-through, like looking at them through dirty water. One of them is my old friend, Tommy Hutchins. He died trying to save others when the explosion started. Right now he's kneeling next to the main gas line, checking it for leaks, just like he did every day. "Tommy?" I whisper. He looks up at me. His eyes are sad and tired. "David, what are you doing down here?" I'm supposed to survey the mine for safety." Tommy stands up slowly. "Safety? It's too late for that, David. It was too late 11 years ago." Other miners start to notice me. They stop their work and gather around. I recognize them all. Bobby Chen, who taught me to use a pickaxe. Frank Morrison, who always shared his coffee. Old Pete Walker, who'd been mining longer than anyone. We tried to warn them. Pete says. His voice sounds like it's coming from the bottom of a deep well. About the gas buildup, about the bad ventilation. But they wouldn't listen. Who wouldn't listen? I ask. The company, the safety inspectors. They knew this place was a death trap, but they kept us working anyway. Tommy points to a pile of papers on a broken desk. Look for yourself. I walk over and shine my light on the papers. They're old safety reports, yellowed with age. POTS, after page of violations, dangerous gas levels, broken ventilation systems, cracked support beams. All dated weeks before the explosion. All ignored by Harlan Deep Mining Company. They killed us, Frank says. As sure as if they'd pulled a trigger. And then they covered it up. Blamed it on equipment failure. Told our families it was just an accident. I feel sick. Not from the bad air, but from anger. Why are you telling me this? Because you can do something about it, Tommy says. You can get out of here. You can tell people the truth. But first, old Pete adds, you got to understand what really happened that day. And what's still happening. The ghost miners start to fade away. One by one, they disappear like smoke. Wait, I call out. Don't go. But they're already gone. The chamber is empty again, just me and the old mining equipment. And then I hear something that makes my skin crawl. Singing. Faint and high-pitched, like tiny voices carried on the wind. Canary song. Coming from deeper in the mine, where no canary should be able to survive. The canary song gets louder as I follow it deeper into the mine. I know I should turn back. Every instinct I have screams at me to get out, get back to the surface, forget what I've seen. But I can't. The song is beautiful and sad, and it's calling to me like it wants to show me something important. The tunnel narrows even more. I have to crawl in places where the ceiling's caved in. My knees get wet from the water on the floor. The walls press in on both sides like the mountain is trying to squeeze me. My flashlight starts to flicker. I smack it against my palm and it steadies, but I know the battery won't last much longer. The singing stops. I'm in complete silence now, except for my own breathing and the drip of water somewhere in the dark. I stop crawling and listen. Then I hear footsteps behind me. Slow, I footsteps, like someone in mining boots walking through water. I turn around and shine my light back the way I came. The tunnel's empty, but I can still hear the footsteps getting closer. I crawl faster. The tunnel ahead opens up into another chamber bigger than the others. I pull myself through the opening and stand up. This place is different, older. The walls aren't coal and rock. They're natural stone, carved smooth by underground water. This isn't part of the mine. It's a cave that the miners broke into while digging. And it's full of canaries, hundreds of them. All dead, all perfectly preserved like the ones I saw earlier. They hang from thin wires attached to the ceiling, their little yellow bodies turning slowly in the air like decorations. But these aren't in cages. They're free, floating in the dead air like they're still trying to fly. What is this place? I whisper. The heart, says a voice behind me. I spin around. Tommy Hutchins stands at the tunnel entrance. But he looks different now, more solid, more real. The heart of what? I ask. The mine. This is where it all starts and ends. Where all the dead miners come when they can't find peace. More ghosts appear around the chamber. Not just the 23 who died in the explosion. Dozens of them. Men who died over the 40 years this mine was operating. Cave-ins, gas poisoning, equipment accidents, black lung disease. We're all trapped here, says a ghost I don't recognize. Can't move on, can't rest. Why? I ask. Because of what they did to us, Tommy says. The company, the government inspectors. They knew this place was killing us, but they let it happen anyway. For profit, for coal, for money. An older ghost steps forward. His clothes are from the 1920s. I was the first to die here. Cave-in 1923. Been waiting 50 years for justice. Justice for what? They falsified the safety reports, bribed the inspectors. When men died, they covered it up, told the families it was their own fault for being careless. Tommy points to a metal box sitting on a natural shelf in the rock. It's all in there. Every bribe, every cover-up, every lie. We've been collecting the evidence for decades. I walk over to the box. It's rusty, but intact. Inside are papers, photographs, letters. Proof that Harlan Deep Mining Company knew exactly how dangerous this place was. Take it, Tommy says. Get it to the surface. Show the world what really happened here. I pick up the box. It's heavy, full of decades of secrets. But then the canaries start singing again. Not a pretty song this time, a warning song. Loud and panicked, like they're trying to tell me to run. The chamber starts to shake. Dust and small rocks fall from the ceiling. The ghost miners look around nervously. What's happening? I ask. It knows you're here, old Pete says. It doesn't want you to leave. What knows I'm here? The shaking gets worse. Cracks appear in the stone walls. Water starts pouring in from somewhere above. The mine itself, Tommy says. All that death, all that anger, all that pain. It's made this place into something else. Something alive. Something that feeds on suffering. A sound like thunder echoes through the chamber. But it's not coming from above. It's coming from below, from deeper in the earth. It wants to keep you here with us, Frank Morrison says. Forever. The water's up to my ankles now. The canaries are singing so loud it hurts my ears. How do I get out? I shout over the noise. The main shaft, Tommy yells back. But it's flooded. Has been for years. There's another way, says the old ghost from the 1920s. The ventilation tunnel. It connects to the surface, but you'll have to go through the explosion site. Where the 23 died? Where we died, Tommy corrects, and where the mine spirit is strongest. The chamber lurches like an earthquake hit it. More cracks appear. The ceiling starts to sag. Go! Tommy shouts. Take the evidence. Tell our story. Set us free. I clutch the metal box to my chest and run toward a narrow opening I can see in the far wall. Water swirls around my feet. The canary's song follows me as I squeeze through the gap. Behind me, I hear the chamber collapsing. Rock crashes down where I was standing just seconds ago. I'm in another tunnel now, this one heading upward. My lungs burn from running, but I can't stop. Something's chasing me. I can feel it like a cold wind at my back. The mine spirit, born from decades of death and corporate greed, and it doesn't want me to escape with the truth. The tunnel slopes upward, but it's slow going. Water runs down the walls and makes everything slippery. My flashlight's getting dimmer. The metal box full of evidence weighs me down, but I can't let go of it. Behind me, something's coming. I can hear it sliding through the water, scraping against the walls. It sounds huge, like the mountain itself is moving. I climb faster. The tunnel splits into two paths. I take the left one, hoping it leads to the surface. My breathing mask is fogged up, but I don't dare stop to clean it. Then I see light ahead. Not electric light. Pale, greenish light that flickers like candle fire. I come around a bend and stop. I'm back in the main explosion chamber where I saw the ghost miners. But now it's different. The walls glow with that strange green light, and the chamber's full of men. Not ghost miners this time. Living men in expensive suits. They sit around a long table like they're having a business meeting. Their faces are pale, and their eyes are completely black. When they see me, they all turn to look at the same time, like they're one person instead of 20. Mr. Blacklung, says the man at the head of the table. His voice sounds like rocks grinding together. So good of you to join us. I recognize him from old newspaper photos. Harold Sutton, the president of Harlan Deep Mining Company. He died of a heart attack in 1965, 3 years after the explosion. You're dead, I say. Are we? Sutton laughs, and the sound makes my teeth hurt. Don't. We prefer to think of ourselves as permanently invested in this operation. The other men laugh too. I recognize some of them. Company executives, government inspectors, politicians. All dead, all corrupt, all responsible for the deaths of good miners. You can't leave, says another man. I think he's the safety inspector who took bribes to ignore violations. You know too much. People deserve to know the truth, I say, holding the metal box tighter. The truth? Sutton stands up. His suit is moldy and torn. Worms crawl out of his mouth when he talks. The truth is that coal built this country. The truth is that some men have to die so others can prosper. The truth is that your pathetic little crusade ends here. The green light gets brighter. The walls start to shake again. But this time it's not just the chamber. I can feel the whole mine moving, shifting, like it's alive. This place is ours now, Sutton says. We've made it into something new, something that will keep making coal forever. And you're going to help us. Never. Oh, but you will. You see, Mr. Blacklung, this mine doesn't just trap the dead. It makes the living dead, too. All it takes is time, and we have all the time in the world. The floor starts to crack open beneath my feet. Something black and oily bubbles up through the cracks. It smells like rotten eggs and dead things. I run. Behind me, the dead executives laugh and shout, "You can't escape. This mine owns you now." I race through tunnels I don't recognize. The whole place is changing around me, walls moving, new passages opening up, old ones disappearing. The mine really is alive, and it's trying to trap me like a spider's web. But then I hear something else, singing again. The canaries. I follow the sound up a steep slope. My legs feel like rubber. The metal box cuts into my chest where I'm holding it. The singing gets louder. It's coming from above. I see daylight. Real daylight. Not the green glow from the evil spirits. A crack in the ceiling where part of the mine roof caved in years ago. I climb toward it using broken rocks and old support beams like a ladder. The dead executives are still chasing me. I can hear them sliding through the tunnels below, getting closer. Almost there. The daylight's getting brighter. My hand reaches the surface. I pull myself up through the crack and roll onto grass and weeds. Fresh air fills my lungs. Sunshine warms my face. I made it out. But when I look back at the crack, I see hands reaching up from below, white, rotting hands trying to follow me. "The evidence!" I hear Sutton screaming from underground. "Bring back our evidence!" I get to my feet and run toward the main mine entrance where Jim is waiting with the truck. "David!" he shouts when he sees me. "Thank God, we lost radio contact hours ago. What happened down there?" I'm covered in mud and coal dust. Water drips from my clothes. I'm holding the metal box like my life depends on it. "Get the sheriff," I tell him, "and call the newspaper. I got something they need to see." Jim looks at the box. "What is it?" "Proof. Proof that Harlan Deep Mining Company knew they were killing their workers. Proof that government inspectors took bribes to look the other way. Proof that 23 good men died because greedy people cared more about money than human lives." As we drive away, I look back at the mine entrance one more time. The canaries are there. Not dead ones this time. Living, yellow canaries, singing in the trees around the mine. They're free now. Free to fly wherever they want. Just like the truth. That was 3 months ago. October now, and the leaves are turning colors on the mountains. The story made headlines in newspapers across the state. Mining company cover-up revealed. Decades of corruption exposed. Ghost evidence solves 50-year mystery. Not that anyone believes the ghost part. I tell people I found the evidence in an old office deep in the mine. Let them think what they want. What matters is the evidence was real. Harold Sutton Jr., the dead man's son, got arrested last week. Turns out the company's still been covering things up, still bribing inspectors, still putting profit over people's lives. But not anymore. The families of the dead miners are finally getting the money they deserved. The government's cleaning up the acid mine drainage that was poisoning the streams. And Harlan Deep Mine No. 7 got sealed up proper, with concrete and steel that nothing can break through. The mine spirits are quiet now. No more ghost miners, no more dead executives, no more evil presence in the mountain. Tommy and the others found their peace when the truth came out. My black lung's been getting better too. Doctor says he's never seen anything like it. Says it's like my lungs are healing themselves. I know why, even if I can't explain it. Sometimes I go back to the sealed mine entrance, just to make sure it stays sealed. The canaries are always there, singing in the trees. Yellowbirds, free and alive, their songs carrying on the mountain wind. They're not warnings anymore. They're celebrations. Today, I brought my grandson with me. He's 10 years old, curious about everything. He asks me about the mine, about what it was like working underground. It was dark, I tell him, and dangerous. But the worst part wasn't the cave-ins or the gas. It was the way some people treated the miners like they didn't matter, like they were just tools to be used up and thrown away. But you stopped them, right, Grandpa? I helped. But the real heroes were the men who died in that mine. They're the ones who showed me the truth. A yellow canary lands on a branch near us. It tilts its little head and sings a few notes. "What's it saying?" my grandson asks. I listen to the song. It's pure and clear and beautiful. It's saying the truth always finds a way out of them. Dark, I tell him, no matter how deep it's buried. The canary spreads its wings and flies away, up toward the blue sky above the mountains. Free, just like we all should be. My name is David Blacklung, and I used to be afraid of going underground. But sometimes you have to face the darkness to bring the truth into the light. And sometimes, if you listen real close, you can hear the canaries singing.